Good morning, everyone. Just 1 minute while we start procedures.
Recording in progress.
Thanks, team and Chair Hopkins, we are ready to begin.
Thank you very much, Mark. Please note that Spanish translation is available in Zoom. To select translation services, please click the globe icon on the Zoom and select Spanish. If during any public comments, a commenter is speaking in Spanish, our English-speaking participants may go to the globe and select English, listen to the translation of the comment. I will now ask that Julie please go ahead and share this message in Spanish.
Thank you, Linda. Muy buenos días a todos y a todas. Bienvenidos a la reunión de la Junta de Supervisores. Esta reunión será interpretada simultáneamente. Para escuchar en español, por favor, haga clic en la imagen que se encuentra al pie de la página y elija su idioma español. También puede hacer clic para silenciar el audio original en donde dice Mute Original Audio, escuchar solo la interpretación. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate it. Now, in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day, and before we say the Pledge of Allegiance, I would actually like to begin our meeting with a land acknowledgement. And I would also like to my colleagues for support in terms of incorporating this into future meeting protocols and potentially working with our tribal leaders to move this forward as a formal item before the board. But to begin, I'd like to share this. The County of Sonoma recognizes that we are on the ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok, Pomo, and Wapo, who are the original caretakers of this area. We respectfully acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have been stewarding and maintaining relationship on this land as knowledge keepers for millennia. The County of Sonoma is dedicated to understanding and educating the public about historical and ongoing connections between land conservation and social inequities. It includes the histories and forced removal and displacement and broken promises with Indigenous peoples as a part of American history. Indigenous people are not just in our history. We strive to optimize Indigenous voices to share their own history as to not perpetuate another form of being silenced. While recognizing the past, we honor the resiliency of Native people still in their ancestral territories in relationship with their land and culture. This acknowledgement does not take the place of relationship with Indigenous communities, but serves as a gesture in respect to the land we are on. If any of my colleagues wish to add anything to this, anything, Supervisor Gore?
Chair Hopkins, I want to thank you for reading that. We have a lot of work to do. I'm not going to give a speech, just rather follow-up opportunities. And just a reminder, I know we've all had connections with our tribal partners, especially what are considered to kind of be the record tribes here in Sonoma County, and also the Michwa Wapo, which has fought to have federal recognition. I think the big thing here is that we are working behind the scenes, and we'd like to make sure that we do this correct, is to set up a good process for a top-in-class tribal consultation policy that includes how we as individuals, but also as a government and as department heads, how we do the work rather than just sending something to get the box checked. We've had conversations with tribal leaders over the past year and a half about this. I know Regional Parks and Office of Equity have engaged in those too. So I appreciate you bringing this up, and I think it's a good start. So thank you. Onward.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore. Any further thoughts from my colleagues? With that, we can go ahead and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Supervisor Gorin, do you want to lead us today?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Gorin, for leading us. So with that, we will move on to the approval of the agenda. And a point of clarification, item number 2 on today's consent calendar seeks board authorization to accept state block grant funds from the California Department of Housing and Community Development through the adoption of a resolution. With that, I will go and ask you to lead us in a roll call vote on the approval of the agenda, please.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Supervisor Abbott,
Aye.
Supervisor Corsi,
Yes.
Supervisor Gore,
Yes. Question. This is approval of the agenda. Had a question on a couple items. Is that still appropriate?
We can pull them from consent when we get
Okay,
to
cool.
consent. Yeah. Mhm.
thank you. Chair Hopkins.
Yes. And so with that, we will be moving on to the consent calendar, which is items 1 through 15. Item does require a 4/5 vote. And I hear that we have questions on a couple of the consent items. Supervisor Gore, would you like to remove a couple so that we can discuss them? Or do you want to just ask a couple of questions?
You know, I would love to ask a question. I don't know if the county administrator has notified General Services, Caroline Judy, if she's available, but I have a question awarded the annual job contracts, and it's with respect to applicability to the living wage ordinance passed and how long the term of these is for and where we go.
Marcy, do we have Caroline Judy in the queue if we can bring her forward?
Yes, she is here, and it's just a second for the technical transition.
Okay.
Good morning, supervisors. As I was coming into the meeting, I lost the second part of your question, Supervisor Gore. If you could restate it, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Caroline. It's a pleasure to see you. Happy Tuesday.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 5, award of annual job order contracts is pretty pro forma for us. The only it's not is we have gone through this and asked questions a couple different times about contracting law and how we continue to evolve with that. We were living wage ordinance and direction to staff maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Obviously, the intent of the board was to study much further, and I think there's a lot of stuff that we're not only going to look at, but potentially changes we might make. Just interested in the term of these contracts. Number 1, applicant to living wage ordinance standards. And so my assumption would be that these would re-up next year, and then we'd be able to see if new living wage ordinance, contracting policy is embedded into those.
That's correct, Supervisor. Through the chairperson, these are annual contracts, the job order contracts. They are essential for us in General Services in delivering capital projects, such as we mentioned in the board item, the Los Quilcos Villages, some of our generator projects that we've completed recently. Those were all delivered under the job order contracting methodology. So we do come to your board on an annual basis with these awards, and so we will have opportunity as we go through the procurement study that your board has requested. We'll have an opportunity to evaluate these types of construction agreement methodologies, as well as our other approaches to procurement.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything else on that. So question answered. I appreciate attention to it and look forward to the policy changes we'll review.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No other items, Supervisor Gore?
You know, the only one that I just want to tag, since we're talking about contracting and that we need to come back when we talk about either living wage ordinance or other things, is there's been brought to, I think, maybe a lot of our attentions, is that one of the most important things we can look is how long we have people wait as they have an invoice to us for services and get paid back. We've gotten a lot of feedback from not just bigger contracting firms and security firms that work on like Los Quilcos and other areas, but also even translators and other things that sometimes they're in a situation where they're even reaching out to our office to badger us to get an invoice paid after translation services 8 or 9 months later. So we have to be cognizant of what we're doing. And if there's any comments within this item, but I mean, that's just a kind of using the contracting discussion to say, ask for a time for that to come back.
Thank you. With that, I also had one small thing that I want to flag. I want to congratulate Supervisor Corsi on the hazardous tree removal in his district. also ask that in addition to the item before us, that we get a little bit more information and kind of thoughts about plans on a hazardous tree removal project when we have our vegetation management discussion later this year. So with that, any other last questions? I think that we can go ahead and accept public comment on the calendar then, which is items 1 through 15. And I'm not seeing any public comment. Oh, there's one public commenter in person. So we'll go ahead and walk into the chambers. Welcome.
Morning.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm the applicant for agenda item number 7, and just wanted to thank Allison and her team at Permit Sonoma for a great job. I'm here for any comment or questions you guys might have, and just wanted to let you guys know I'm here.
Thank you so much for attending. Anything from members of the board? All right. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your presence this morning. I appreciate that. And I believe that is last commenter. Oh, sorry, Darren, did you want his name? Yes. Can we get your name just for the record? That might be helpful.
Are you a real person?
Thomas Billiter, civil engineer with BC Engineering Group.
Thank you very
you.
much. Really, really appreciate it. All right, on the lot line. And so with that, Marcy, would you go ahead and please accept public comment via Zoom?
Thank you. This is for public comment on the consent calendar items before the board. If you could please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9 if you would like to comment. Thank you. There are no hands for comment.
Thank you very much, Marcy. So with that, we will bring it back to the board. And unless other final comments, let's go ahead and take a vote on the consent calendar this morning, please.
Supervisor Gore.
Aye.
Supervisor Rabbit.
Aye.
Supervisor Corsi.
Yes.
Supervisor Gore.
Aye.
Chair Hopkins.
Yes. And with that, the consent calendar does pass, and that leads us into item 16 on the regular calendar, which is with our ACTTC Rozier, and it is an appointment of a retiree extra help. So I will go ahead and hand it over to you.
Good morning, Chair Hopkins and members of the board. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm Eric Rozier, the Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector, and I'm here to request the appointment of Julianne Camplain as an Administrative Services Officer 2, or ASO 2, in a retiree extra help capacity to fill a critical need resulting from several recent vacancies. Government Code Section 7522.56 states that a retired person shall not be eligible to be employed for a period of 180 days following the date of retirement, unless the employer certifies the nature of the employment, that the appointment is necessary for a critically needed position, and the appointment has been approved by the governing body of the employer in a public meeting. Ms. Camplain retired on September 20th of this year after 31 years with the county, including 16 years as the ASO2 in the auditor's office. We did successfully fill the ASO2 position with an internal candidate that transferred from our Enterprise Financial Systems Support Division. And unfortunately, this division has recently experienced a high turnover rate, and this promotion leaves the division with several key vacancies. As a result, I anticipate that the ASO2 will be limited by the need to work on time-sensitive EFS-related projects during the ensuing recruitment period. Additionally, yesterday was the last day in the office for another management level staff member in our small administrative division. Ms. Camplain has previously provided backup support for this position. In the current employment market, it's difficult to determine how long it'll take to fill these vacancies, and the appointment of Ms. Camplain will help to provide critical budget, HR, safety coordinator, and continuity of operations support for the entire office on an as-needed basis. The ACTTC budget has sufficient salary savings to cover the costs of this appointment. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ACTTC Rozier. Any questions from members of the board on this? Seeing none, I would ask if there are any public commenters in person at the chambers who would wish to comment on this matter. Seeing none, I would ask Marcy if there are any members of the public who would wish to comment on this matter.
If there's anyone in the Zoom meeting who would like to comment on number 16 on today's agenda, please raise your hand or press *9 to raise your hand if you are a phone attendee. And there is one hand, so if I could please request to have the timer slide up. Oh, goodness, I'm sorry. So this is for Lydia. Lydia, I'm not able to allow you to speak. It's showing that you have a kind of an older version of Zoom. I don't know if you're able to email any comments that you have to bos@sonoma-county.org, or you were wanting to comment on subsequent items. You could always use the phone-in information on the agenda and press *9 to raise your hand. And I do apologize for that. And thank you. That does conclude public comment.
Thank you, Marcy. Any further comments from members of the board? Seeing none, I would ask Marcy if you want us in a roll call vote on this item.
Supervisor Gore.
Aye.
Supervisor Rabbit.
Aye.
Supervisor Corsi.
Yes.
Supervisor Gore.
Yes.
Chair Hopkins.
Yes. And so that does bring us on. Thank you so much, by the way, Eric, for presenting this item, and I wish you the best of luck with this extra help. Hopefully that makes things more sane in your office.
Appreciate it.
So with that, we will be moving on to item 17, which is a formal public hearing on the 2021 county redistricting process. And so since this is a formal public hearing, just want to let everyone know, we will be beginning with a presentation. Then we will entertain any board questions. Then we will formally the public hearing, accept public comment, close the public hearing, and then bring it back to the board for a deliberation. And one thing that I will ask my fellow board members, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to communicate directly with our chair and vice chair of our advisory redistricting commission. And so, since we all have experience representing our districts, it might be a good opportunity to sort of ask questions for our chair and vice chair to bring back to the commission, or to share any thoughts of things that we have noticed, when it comes to representing our district. So I think it's an opportunity for a little bit of discourse and dialogue, and an opportunity to really exchange ideas with the commission via the chair and vice chair. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce, we have our chair of the Advisory Redistricting Commission, Ed Sheffield. Thank you so much for your service. Our vice chair, Anna Horta, of the Advisory Redistricting Commission. We are also joined by Crystal Carey-Harrow and Yvonne Shu from the County Administrator's Office, who have been working tirelessly on this effort. So go ahead and hand it over to the four of you for the presentation.
Good morning, Chair Hopkins and members of the board. I'm Yvonne Shu in the County Administrator's Office.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I'm wondering if you can make that full screen.
Is it not full screen?
It's not, yeah, and it's just a little bit easier, I think, for members of the public to read the text when it is. Thanks.
Is that better?
No, I'm still seeing it in the frame.
No.
Yvonne,
Yeah.
if you go to view,
and then full screen mode.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Are you able to see us, Yvonne?
Um,
Okay, good.
All right. All right. Let's try this again. All right. Good morning, Chair Hopkins and members of the board. I'm Yvonne Shu in the County Administrator's Office. Today's action is to receive an update on the redistricting process and 2020 census data. While we have had other public meetings for redistricting, including commission meetings and town halls, this is the second public hearing for redistricting. 4 are required by California Elections Code by December 7th. We will have had 5. Today's presentation includes an update from National Demographics Corporation, DC, on the redistricting effort to date and 2020 census data. The county will provide an update on their efforts as well, and then we'll have closing remarks from the vice chair and chair of the Advisory Redistricting Commission. So now I would like to turn the presentation over to Shalise Tilton, Senior Consultant in DC.
Good morning, Chair Hopkins and members of the board. My name is Shalise Tilton, and I'm Senior Consultant representing National Demographics Corporation. My colleague, Ken Chalkins, is also participating as a consultant from NDC assigned to this project. Just give you a quick shot of what has been completed so far. The initial meeting of the commission was held in June. Held the meeting in July 26th. I believe we held meetings July 26th in July. Our first official hearing was August 23rd, and August 23rd was the first time when we officially held a hearing to count towards the Fair Maps Act. And at that point, the discussion was centered around communities of interest, other mapping priorities, and the mapping tools that were available. We had a training session on September 1st. And then the commission had to discuss its equity ad hoc committee report and guiding principles that are going to be addressed later by the chair and vice chair of the commission. And then have a dish shop on September 15th to discuss again communities of interest and mapping tools. Next slide. The census, as you are aware, it was delayed. We did receive federal numbers on August 12th, and they went to work to zero out all the populations of the state prisons and reassign all those state incarcerated persons to their last known home address. We see that data on after midnight on September 20th, so technically it was September 21st. We did errors. The methodology is computed by the state, and they did make a correction that we received late on September 27th. So we've had a very short amount of time to work with the data, but we did want to get information to you today. So I appreciate your patience in fact, we were working on it late Sunday night, didn't get it all put together until very late Sunday night and to the board. Okay. So I realize it's short notice, but we did want to make sure you had the opportunity to see it today. Next slide. We're asking the public, anyone who has maps ready to go, submit them now. Do not wait for these deadlines. The first round of deadlines is October 8th, and then final, if you're not able to make the October 8th, get it in by October 15th. The commission will start reviewing draft maps and narrowing it down to 3 to 5 focus maps, requesting any modifications to those focus maps. We'll be holding workshops on October 22nd. On maps and then the presentation of the final draft maps, and identify 2 to 3 more focus maps for the board to consider. Next slide. On November 2nd will be the first opportunity for this board to look at those maps and to also start to provide any modifications if requested, to identify the preferred map. November 16th, another opportunity to identify a preferred, and then looking on December 7th to officially introduce an ordinance adopting the map. The statutory deadline is December 15th, and so we'll be having the second reading, which will officially adopt that ordinance on the 14th. We realize it's compressed timeline, but again, it's all driven by the delayed census and the Fair Maps Act that requires a specific amount of hearings. Also, the Fair Maps Act, I should just point out, didn't allow us to start review maps until a minimum of a week after that official data was released. So everyone is experiencing the same time crunch. Next slide. We must follow federal law and state law when we're drawing the maps. The first is federal law, which is equal population. Equal population as adjusted by the state of California, again, to reassign state and grade persons to their last known home addresses. We also must draw maps to meet the Federal Voting Rights Act and no racial gerrymandering, meaning we cannot use race as a primary or the only factor when drawing maps. The second column in the middle is guided by the Fair Maps Act. This is enacted and became effective January 2020. And what the Fair Maps Act does is provide guidance on the priorities that need to be used when we're drawing maps. And they are actually in priorities. So geographically contiguous is the first priority, meaning that for the most part, every district must have one solid single boundary. Undivided neighborhoods and communities of interest. I'm going to talk just a little bit more about what communities of interest are. This has been a main focus of the commission and will continue to be in focus because we want to hear from the community. It's really the community that defines what those communities of interest are. The third criteria is that we respect the boundaries of the existing cities and existing census designated places. Fourth is easily identifiable boundaries. Means following major streets, major highways, waterways, anything that is easily described. Compactness necessarily the size or the shape of the district, but that we do not bypass one group of people to get to a more distant group of people. We cannot draw boundaries to favor or discriminate against a political party. Once we've met all of the federal and the state criteria, then we can look at other traditional redistricting principles, such as minimizing those voters that are shifted from a 2022 election year to a 2024 election year. Also, if we met the previous criteria, we can look at avoiding boundaries that would pair incumbents in the same district. If it's possible to do so, we would present that option. Slightly underpopulate a district, but when we talk about equal population, it doesn't have to be exactly equal population, but there can be no more of a difference of 10% between your smallest populated district and your greatest populated district. So if you know a particular district is going to have future growth, you can slightly underpopulate it, but again, we still need to stay within that 10% deviation from the least populated to the greatest populated district. And then often a consideration is preserving the core of the existing districts. And the next slide, please. Sorry, pardon me. What you're seeing on your slide here is this is the official data. This is the official California prisoner adjusted data as put out by the California statewide database. It's showing that the total population in the county is 489,710. That's as of the April of 2020. The way this particular summary is on the right-hand side is the total. That means county-wide. So when you're looking at the total population, 489,710. The next segment down is total population broken out by race and ethnicity. And so that is total population. We're speaking total population in terms of balancing your districts. It's population including U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens and people of all ages, from babies on up. So it's every breathing person that was in the census. So that second category gives you the total population broken down by race and ethnicity. And on the right hand, again, you can see those percentages break down by race and ethnicity. I do want to point out when we're saying the percentage of Hispanic, when the census asks the question states, are you Hispanic or Latino? So for purpose of this redistricting exercise, Hispanic and Latino are interchangeable terms. The bottom category is the citizen age population, and this citizen voting age population is significant when you're looking at compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act. When we are looking to see how well the boundaries were drawn to help improve the voting strength of our protected class citizens, they will look at the citizen voting population. So those are residents who are 18 years of age and US citizens, meaning they would be eligible, not necessarily registered to vote, but eligible to vote. And you're seeing the race and ethnicity broken down by in this bottom category. Again, over to the right, the overall for the city is 16% Hispanic, 75% white, 2% Black, and 5% Asian Pacific Islander. The next slide, please. The other information we provide, keep in mind that the districts are not balanced or not drawn based on voter registration or voter turnout. But this information is useful when you're drawing your boundaries to see where your voter turnout maybe has a higher concentration or higher voter turnout as opposed to other areas. We're showing you the total voter registration at the top, and then the middle column is voter turnout in November 2020, and then voter turnout in November 2018, broken down by each of the districts. These are the existing districts as they're drawn. You can see, I do want to point out, and this does cause some confusion, is I just mentioned that the terms Latino and Hispanic are interchangeable. You can see when we're looking at this voter registration that we have, and I'll look at the top column just for registration purposes, the percentages of the percentage Latino estimate is 10%, yet the percentage Spanish surname is 9%. So when you look at this graph, you're going to use either one of those numbers, not both. The Latino estimate is what that is NDC has taken the Spanish surnamed numbers and applied the percentage of error that this bureau believes there is in undercounting the Spanish surnames. So we provide that percentage, and we just call it percentage Latino estimate, just to differentiate between two categories. So we believe that the California statewide database, when it counts the Spanish surnames, it's undercounted by but over 1%, close to 2%. So you can see that that's why there's a 10% like a 9% Spanish surname. Just want to point that out when you're looking at that graph. And the next slide, please. Other information that we include when you're helping to analyze your district. So the way that this is useful is you can see how the existing districts are as far as the concentration of these different categories. So let's take the language spoken at home, and you can look at the various districts. For Spanish, our highest district is District 3, where there's 25% of those households speak Spanish in our District 3. Whereas you look at to the far right column, you see countywide 20% of households speak Spanish. So that tells us a story that there is a higher concentration of families that speak Spanish in District 3 than overall countywide. And you can apply that same methodology to each of these categories. This is useful, particularly once we have map drawn, each map will have a demographic summary prepared for it. So you can basically just set the demographic summaries side by side and compare how each have done for whatever particular category you're looking to maybe have a higher concentration in a particular district. For those who it's difficult to read what categories are, let me just read the categories and then we'll move on. The first category is age, then immigration status, language spoken at home, Language fluency, that's those who speak English less than very well. Education for those people 25 years of age and old. Children, households with children, the percentage of the population that are 16 and older, that tells us those are going to become voters. Household income and housing status. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, our today's public hearing is focusing on learning from both from the community on what those communities and neighborhoods are. So we need to hear when we have the public hearing, what's your neighborhood? And we need to know what the geographical boundaries are. We need to be able to eventually translate that to a map. And then beyond neighborhoods, what defines your community? There are various things that would bring a community together. We want to hear what those things are. Make your community, really want you to tell your story of your community and then tell us what the geographical boundaries are. So when we're drawing the maps, we can respect that community and not separate it into various districts unless it would benefit from having multiple representatives. So we always ask, once we define community of interest, then we need to ask the second question, would this community benefit from being included within a single district for its purposes of its effective and fair representation? Next slide. At the city's website at sonomacounty.ca.gov/redistricting. I found if you just do a Google search, Sonoma County redistricting, it will likely do up on the right page. We have different tools to assist in drawing maps. And I encourage you to visit that site so that and play around with those tools and start drawing maps. That's one of the easiest ways to tell the story about your community. Next slide. I do want to point out that if you use one of our tools, or if you use a paper map or whatever format, someone else's tools, in whatever form you send your maps to us, we will professionally produce those maps, and they will all be treated equally and not at the same level. So if your map was drawn, perhaps you just took maybe a AAA map and you just drew boundaries on it, we would professionally produce it. So each would look the same. And then next slide. Each of the districts will have its own set of its own demographic summary as depicted in the slide here, just as we went over on those previous slides. That concludes my presentation about where we've been, what we've accomplished, what the rules are, what we're looking from the community to hear about communities of interest, the mapping tools that are available, and what you expect once we produce those maps and have them available for the public. Just one more note I want to point out is that through a process of weeding out or vetting or culling out any of the maps. All the maps, this is a great 100% transparent process. So you submit a map, we'll produce it. If for some reason it's not population balanced or it doesn't have contiguous boundaries, we will note that so that both the board and the commission know that map cannot be adopted as in its present state. But we do want the public to be assured this is a way to have your voice directly heard. Submit a map, tell your story about what you'd like to see the district to look like. And that concludes my portion. And we go to the next slide. I'll turn it back over to Yvonne.
Actually, I think it might be a good opportunity to take a little break for the board because that was quite a bit of information. So if anyone has any questions on the specific content of those slides, might be a good opportunity to go ahead and ask those questions now. Supervisor Gore.
Thank you so much for the content. This is the data that we've all been waiting for to try to figure out where each district is currently, and perhaps where it needs to go. Of course, I'm looking at District 1, and I've known all along that the Sonoma Valley in particular has not been growing, and we've lost population because of the fires. And some of that population loss hasn't even been counted because the census was completed before the glass fire. So I guess my question is, how are we going to release the information to the media so that they can digest it and have some appropriate speaking points, I guess, about our thoughts on where each of our districts are going and the job ahead of the redistricting commission to try to figure out how they're going to rearrange maybe small amounts of the population.
Terry, I can defer to, we have both a public relations firm that's been hired, and also I know that the committee has an outreach, the commission has an outreach committee that I know that they are going to be giving a report on that may address those questions about how to release to the media and get about the loss of the population due to the fires. I can answer the technical question. Can perhaps those areas where we know we have an undercount because of the loss, if we anticipate that those folks will be coming back, we can possibly, as in fact District 1 is now nearly percent unpopulated, we hope those people return, and if they return, then so slightly underpopulating those areas would help to plan for that future regrowth for those who were not counted in the 2020 census due to being dislocated from the fires.
Thank you so much. Perhaps it would be helpful for the committee to receive report from Permit Sonoma and the city actually about the rate of rebuilding and repopulation, because you would assume that it's going to happen quickly, and it's not. It's taking years for those fire survivors to consider rebuilding and then moving and then rebuild the house. The second question I have involves another part of the undercount. We have a large population of Latinx community and other diverse communities, primarily in the Springs, but not exclusively. And we know because of COVID that, and immigration status potentially, that those populations understandably were underfunded. How will the committee try to anticipate the undercount, not only in one, certainly District 3 and other districts that have large populations of diverse communities?
That's a difficult one, and I know that's a question that the commission from the outset has been struggling with, and I'll give you reason why. Is the law requires that we use the official California statewide, the official count provided by the California database. So the law doesn't allow us to deviate from that, and we're given the numbers, and those are the numbers we must use. So it's a similar answer to the undercounts due to the fire. So if we believe there are amounts in those areas, you can again slightly underpopulate those particular areas. But unfortunately, we're not able to make adjustment to the numbers that are given to us because that's the way the law is written.
I appreciate it. I think when we use census data to determine the needs for additional assistance from Health and Human Services, it will be the counts, the undercounts especially, will be very dissatisfying for those populations that don't receive the services. But I appreciate moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore and Supervisor Corsi.
Thank you. Ms. Tilton, I was interested in the slides that used the statistics that included surnames and identifying people by the sound of their surnames. Is that
standard practice in redistricting, or is it something that NDC does on its own?
It is standard for counting voter registration and voter turnout. And voter registration and voter turnout is not directly related to the balancing of districts and redistricting, but it's another, the data are used to help you determine mainly your communities of interest. So that's common because we don't ask the race and ethnicity questions on your voter registration. And so the state has to come up with a methodology, a way to guess or estimate those percentages.
So those numbers are produced by the state or as part of their review of the census?
Their review of the voter data.
Review of voter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just want to ask, the process that we're going through here kind of gives us the who, what, when, where, how of redistricting, but it leaves out the why. And I'm wondering if that is or can be part of the process of both the committee and the Board of Supervisors receiving maps. An explanation of why the producer of that map or the committee's recommendation of that map, why they are recommending the changes, if there are changes, why they are recommending those particular lines.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, Supervisor Corsi. That will be when the commission starts to review those maps. We will provide the why they preferred a particular map, and typically, largely, it will be focused around those communities of interest and respecting communities of interest. But it will also be making sure we've met all those criteria. So there could be reason why one map was selected over the other, or why the existing an existing district was changed because perhaps it didn't meet the state mandated criteria as well as another option did, or it reflected the new communities of interest that have transpired since the last process.
So will we the maps and these data sets and a narrative to go with each one?
We get the maps and the data sets, and then what typically there's a brief description, and we can give you some bullet points the commission has come up with about that particular map. You find for the most part, the maps will speak for themselves as well. And then when you get the maps, you'll also be able to look at those maps and that's a long way to answer your question. Yes, you will be getting some bullet points as to the features of that map and why the commission selected that particular or maps as maps.
Thank you.
Other questions for Shirley? Supervisor Gore.
Thank you very much, Chair Hopkins, and everybody. Looking forward to hearing from Anna and Ed. So a couple things, just questions on the numbers or just clarification, just what I'm seeing here. Just want to go back to the beginning. What I'm seeing, number one, is that districts 1 and 4 was Supervisor Gore and I need to pick up population, and the others to different degrees. If we were going for the ideal, would need to drop population to whatever it is. Just confirming that.
Yes, but it would be unusual to have a focus be getting exact equal population.
Yeah.
Right now, the existing map is population balanced because it's at 6.38 overall deviation. And as you recall, you can have up to a 10% deviation. So this is a pretty darn good map as it exists today. But you're absolutely right as identifying District 4 as being slightly under, and I mean District 1 and District 4 as being slightly under the ideal. Typically, we don't see the focus of getting that exactly ideal be the main focus. The main focus would be more of meeting the prioritized criteria, keeping, census designated places whole, keeping these whole census designated places are areas that aren't incorporated cities, but they're definitely a well-known area. So and the census actually has defined what those are.
On that note, as you just finished by talking about cities and incorporated areas, I personally, when you all come back or when you're working with your group, would love to see the percentages of each district of incorporated versus unincorporated resident. My colloquial understanding is that, districts 1, 2, and 4 are kind of 2/3 city, 1/3 county. District 3, I don't know if it's 80%, 90%, 95% or whatever, but District 5, Super Hop District, I think it's the opposite. I think it's 70% unincorporated. I'm not sure, but would love to have that information, because it seems like the questions that we'd be asking the committee, and I would love to get Anna and Ed to lean in on this too, is we've talked about this before, is there's the numbers game, the tactical transactional numbers game, but then there's also this question of, as we've talked about, is representation. And I think that's important into the conversation of equity, but then it's also important, as we've talked about, in terms of sharing geographical, like, important things of geographical importance. We've talked about how Supervisor Hopkins and I representing Russian River is good for the Russian River having two voices. The South Bay kind of having 2 voices is good. The Mark West watershed and the Eastern Hills is good to have a couple voices. So it's not just one supervisor bringing voice for an entire area forward. That doesn't mean I'm going to want to change maps, quite honestly, but it does mean that I think it's an important consideration, and I'd love for the redistricting commission to lean in on that as well. Not just look at the numbers. One thing that is, I think, of concern to me is that since we are still under 500,000 population, that's just, I'm putting, that's going to have to be something that we have in our ledge platform very strongly, that we lobby to not be left out. When the CARES Act came through, the fact that we were at that point higher at, I think, 498,000 instead of 500,000 cost us $45 million in CARES Act funding, from my understanding. And so we've seen other examples of that. So I think it's just an important thing that I want to put a footnote on. The other thing is that I'm interested in how, and I guess this would be a lead in to maybe Ed and Anna, is how the conversation about what products come out of this, because we've had, I think, a desire to have this group really engage in on tracking the trends and how our community is shifting and where the numbers are, but at the same time is also maybe advising on other products as well to honor the deep dive people are taking, economic development initiatives and other things. So I know we have a statutory deadline, and I want to hit that with our maps, but I think there's other products that we can do to the group and the work that's diving into the census. So I'm going to let maybe Ed and Anna jump in and I would just ask you guys to really lean in on this conversation about equity, about, some of the angst that to be progress on the equity conversation. What I've learned from a lot of folks who are smarter than me and lead equity work is that you can't, when it gets uncomfortable, you got to keep leaning in. So I'm really interested in that as kind of like a teeing that up, and I'd really hope you guys speak direct to us how the group is going and what's needed. So with that, I'll have some more stuff coming back, but I think that's a good part. Appreciate it.
Great. Other questions for Shalice? Supervisor Rabbit?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the work, and or ARC members as well. Getting back to the why, I know this is a couple of places, and I think actually Supervisor Gore has some Napa residents who actually come down and basically, for all intents and purposes, live, work. They might not live county, but they work, play shop, school, everything else is within the county. And I know there's some other places like that around on the fringes. That one would take that into account as we go forward. It really has to do with the representation and where those particular residents have their most interaction within that district. Seems like that would be something that should be taken into account first and foremost. I think some of the other issues are interesting, and I'm not sure. I know we've gone around and changed over the years whether or not one or two at the coast is better than for representation there and so forth. But those seem to be more on the political side of things that really this board can also take into account. The data is always fascinating. It's fascinating to see it. It is somewhat disappointing knowing what happened with the 500,000 threshold previously, to see the number at 59 as opposed to inching up slightly higher. And I appreciate very much your input on kind of the potential growth of those areas adversely affected by wildfire. I think that was an interesting observation and something that we should follow as we go forward. But I just want to say thank you. I look forward to seeing how the maps turn out and the work of the committee.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Rabbit. And I would like to echo Supervisor Gore's request for an analysis of the incorporated versus unincorporated residents by district. I think that's a very interesting station to have, both for the ARC and also ultimately for the board. I do have a couple of specific questions. One was regarding the household income slide. I'm wondering if you could go to that one. I think it's, let's see if I can find the number. Oh, I don't think mine have numbers. There we go. So, that wasn't, that's not it. That's the voter turnout. I'm looking for the one that has the household income. It also has education, language spoken at home. Perfect. So my question is there any differentiation between that fourth there, which is income 75,000 to 200,000, because that is a huge range, and a family of 6 living on a $75,000 a year income is living in Sonoma County, and a single person or a couple living at 200,000 is certainly living substantially more comfortably. And so I'm really trying to get at, honestly, sort of 30 statistics and trying to identify where those communities of concerns might be within our supervisorial districts. And then if to bring that out further, if there is any other differentiation as to what the definition of a household is, because folks who are trying to support a family have more financial burdens than, say, a retired couple. So is there any additional information that we can glean, in particular from that bucket? Because that bucket to me is just such a huge range.
I'll see if we're able to provide an additional breakdown between that 75K and that 200K. And then as household income, the way to view that is to pair it with the child at home, so children in the household. I don't believe there's a way to actually combine those two statistics. I can check for you though.
Yeah, if that's possible, I think that would be really helpful, because I really would love to be able to identify where families, we've done a lot of work in Sonoma County on ACEs and really looking at where strategic investments and family support would be needed. I think would be a wonderful statistic for us to know as we look at service provision. And then another question that I have is, does the census in any way track what homes previously provided housing and that now are second homes or vacation rentals? Like, is there anything to be read in the decrease in population? Is there a connection to vacation rentals or second homes, or is this really more about the loss of housing stock? But any way of telling what unit previously held full-time, year-round occupants who would have been captured by census data versus homes that are now operating as a business and don't actually contain residents who would be part of a census?
Yeah, that would be an interesting statistics that we don't capture in the redistricting data we have. So it just counts where you were living at the time the census took place.
Do you know if there are any data sort of available through the census regarding that, or just sort of not the particular data set that you're looking at?
I don't know that answer. I don't believe that's attainable through the census data, but your planning department may have additional information on that, permitting department regarding homes that became rentals.
Yes, that would be if all of
Vacation
it.
rentals. Yeah, so that would be something your planning and permitting department.
Yeah,
is
we've looked
better
for that.
suited to answer.
Just looking
Yeah.
for sort of honestly an audit, an external verification. And I would think that somehow there would be a way of tracking, hey, this had someone who was captured in the census last year and someone who was not captured in the census, right? Because the use of has shifted. But I guess I'll keep looking for those kinds of data sets. I believe that those are all my formal questions. I do have some other questions, but I think that they are best directed at our chair and vice chair, unless there are any further questions for Shalise. Supervisor Gore.
You know, one thing that I like what's the question is, we're all looking at these numbers and we're trying to see what they say. What's the story behind them, right? And so I really am interested in the redistricting council kind of getting to a point where it's not just the maps, is what's the story about the future of Sonoma County. And so one that I saw on there as well, just as much as Supervisor Hopkins talked about, splitting up the 75,000 to 200,000 income category. I completely agree. That's the difference between not being able to house in Sonoma County versus, quite honestly, these days in Sonoma County, 200,000 for an average median income is ironically, in terms of you're not high hog on the trough. But there was another one on there. Maybe you could take it to the education, and what I was looking at, I'm trying to pull back up to what it was. It showed how many individuals at age, let me see here, broken. Okay. Basically, I don't think it's that one. Oh yeah, it is the upper age bracket. So if you look at the total number of individuals for population versus you look at the age bracket, realizes is that the adage which has been talked about the last 4 or 5 years in Sonoma County is true, which is we are becoming younger and more Latino, and the white population is getting older. We also see that reflective in our in the voting percentages that we see down below. So I think one of the things that I really want Ms. Tilton is the redistricting commission to kind of think through is how they how they work to give us maps, but also maybe after the fact or as a parallel path is really kind of advise us on these trends we about. That's it.
Supervisor Gorin.
I want to iterate the interest in documenting incorporated and unincorporated, and specifically comparing it to where it was for the last census, because that's the data that we've been using to try to understand the needs of the district, whether it's the current supervisor or future supervisor, folks live in the city. And a lot of folks actually live in the unincorporated areas in the first district. So it would be really good to know how this tracks from a decade ago. So thanks so much.
Any final questions? Supervisor Rabbit.
That reminded me of, I have in front of me the regional housing needs allocation, which our county is appealing, and I'll explain that during announcements later. But there's significant growth anticipated within this document over the next 8 years, which is right in line with obviously the redistricting. And I don't know, obviously, if as my understanding is that you just take it off the census data that we have from the previous at the point in time moving forward. I don't know how this gets played into it with the anticipated housing growth, looking for where that will be and in those particular areas. But it is an interesting conundrum, especially as we, in this particular case, have a lot more housing units for the unincorporated county, obviously scattered through, well, four existing supervisorial districts. But just thought I would mention that as well.
Excellent point, Supervisor Rabbit. And actually, I would be really interested if it's possible to get the RENA numbers for all the cities as well, because that really should be the guide to growth. And that would really sort of give us a little bit of an insight into what the potential growth within the supervisorial districts could look like as well. With that, and pending any final questions? All right, I will go ahead and hand it back to our presenters, and thanks so much for allowing us to ask those questions.
Okay, so Yvonne Shu again with the County Administrator's Office. I just have this slide here as a transition slide just to show you some of the efforts in terms of outreach. This is an example of a bus sign, which I actually saw in person the other day, so it was kind of exciting. So we're doing a lot of different kinds of efforts. That cover that in another slide. But first, I want to cover briefly the funding of the redistricting effort. So the board has approved $243,800 in contingency funding for this effort. We expect the full amount to be fully expended by the end of the project, only on consultants, translation and interpretation services, and outreach materials, and commissioner stipends. Original estimates have increased based on commissioner requests for additional meetings, facilitators, and establishment of ad hocs of the commission. A little bit more information on the contracts. We have a redistricting consultant, NDC, Shirley Tilton. We also had a facilitator, Dr. Rosa Perez, who facilitated our additional commissioner meeting on September 13th that was focused on. She will also provide a summary report from that panel discussion that we had of local speakers. And I think this will get to some that Supervisor Gore was mentioning in terms of taking this information further in additional county activities. We also have hired Hernandez consultant, Herman G. Hernandez for community engagement. And we selected him based on his experience with the PG&E, also his local trust and knowledge. And so he's really helping us drive the final push to get input before the draft maps in mid-October. In terms of outreach efforts, the California Elections Code states that the board shall take steps to encourage residents, including those in underrepresented communities and non-English speaking communities, to participate in the redistricting public review process. So to that end, the county has undertaken all of the activities here to get the word out, plus others. Also, many of the commissioners have reached out to their networks to spread about redistricting and have participated in discussions and interviews. And Pepe Smith, who is part of the NDC team, has reached out to list community-based organizations by phone, also by email. So getting a little bit more information on the community engagement from Herman G. Hernandez. So he is helping specifically with seeking and collecting input from underrepresented communities, including Latinx, Asian, Black, and Native communities. His engagement plan includes all of the following elements: focus groups, outdoor park mapping events one Friday, virtual map presentations, also virtual meeting presentations. So again, he is helping with this final few weeks and really just trying to building on the momentum of the October 15th deadline to get as much public input and draft maps as possible to inform the initial batch of those maps. I just want to cover briefly the types of redistricting. And these again are optional. It says a local jurisdiction may establish by resolution. And so the county did establish the advisory redistricting commission. There's also a hybrid and an independent redistricting commission. So here you can see the engagement and involvement with community between 2011 and 2021. In 2011, we had an internal group with 3 public meetings that helped to redraw the lines. And this year, we have a 19-member advisory redistricting commission. And by the end of the process, we will have had 14 public meetings. And then The advisory commission had, specific concerns related to engagement and outreach, as well as with equity. And so we helped them to, convene two different groups. The engagement ad hoc was comprised of 4 commissioners, and they were focused on how to reach those represented communities more effectively. And they are providing support to Mr. Hernandez as needed, and feedback as well. The equity ad hoc is comprised of 5 commissioners. They drafted a set of principles for the advisory redistributions rate, which we'll finalize at the next meeting on October 18th. And they also requested a facilitator and suggested Dr. Perez that meeting. And so now I'd like to actually turn this over to Anna Horta, the ARC Vice Chair, and Sheffield, the ARC Chair, to provide their input on the process to date, and also to answer any questions you might have.
All right. We could probably take the slide down. Good morning, supervisors. I want to start off by thanking you, Chair Hopkins, and supervisors for opting to establish this commission. I also want to thank county staff, Yvonne and Costello, as well as NDC, Shalice team, and also Herman G. Hernandez for the work that he's doing on outreach and connecting with folks in the community. We are 19 members strong. We are your constituents. We are all active and engaged in the community, and we are diverse in makeup. 19 is a big number. It's quite a lot of perspective, but a good crew. It's been challenging to conduct a meeting, especially via Zoom, with so many people, but we hold it together. As chair, I've tried to make meetings as respectful and welcoming as possible. Our meetings are somewhat unconventional, maybe a little informal, because there are so many of us, but so because I think we get better participation when people feel comfortable speaking up, and commissioners certainly do speak up, and we allow this occurs during our meetings. Our meetings tend to run quite a bit over the time that we've scheduled them for. Again, thank you, staff, for putting up with us. I begin each meeting by reminding all commissioners that this is a new process. We are the county's first advisory redistricting commission, so we are learning as we go along. Also, that supervisor and county staff are new to this process as well. So it's important that we commissioners take deliberate and intentional steps to be as transparent and mindful and committed to the process and to the job as we can be. I also start things by grounding us in our mission to assist you, the supervisors, in the redrawing of district boundaries, and that our role is to oversee a process that actively engages our community in one of the most important once in a decade of our democracy, and that's giving people a voice. And I believe that all of our commissioners are on board with the mission. We have thought-provoking discussions and plenty of participation, particularly on the importance of the community. And from our first meeting last summer, it was clear that commissioners were especially focused on equity and taking the necessary steps to ensure that everyone gets the representation we deserve. And part of this acknowledgement on in our meetings when we created 2 separate ad hoc groups, the groups that that Yvonne talked about, one to focus on community reach, the engagement piece, and the other on equity. And I'm going to stop there for just a moment, and I'm going to, now that our vice chair, Ana Horta, she's going to talk a little bit about equity and outreach and more of the work that commissioners are doing.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, like Ed said, thank you to the board and thank you to the county staff for the support and for giving us and the community the opportunity to participate in this process. So just like Ed has said, the commissioners identified the need to outreach and engage, and then this is a new process for all of us. So we had to really spend some time to understand things, to inform ourselves, and to also provide that information to the community. Unfortunately, we don't receive civic lessons in the country, which will be helpful. So many of us have some kind of understanding of things, but since this has never been done before, we decided to engage and create these two separate ad hoc committees. One with the purpose to really involve public and having the public understand what are we doing, that they can participate. It has been great to have all the efforts, outreach efforts, especially I think the latest with Herman G have been very successful. He has been particularly engaging with each group, and also being on the ground. It's extremely helpful. One-on-one, talking to people is oftentimes the best way. Also, as commissioners, each of us have reached out to our community, to the people we know, the places we go, and talk about these. And we requested, that more information is, for example, printed, like maps and handouts, so we can have those things with us as we go in the community and just hand them out for people that might be interested, talk to them about it. This is very important for members that don't, like members in the community that don't have access to internet, for example, or it makes it very easy, and that I'm very thankful that we're able to get those to-go kits to have with us. The other committee, ad hoc committee, is the equity, and all of us have had a commitment from the beginning towards equity. So we have created the principles, equity principles that we have been discussing. We had another meeting on September 13, where we received and we heard the experiences of members that have been marginalized, historically marginalized in this county. Some of the stories that we don't know. I might be part of the Latinx community, but I'm not part of the Asian Pacific Islander community. So, I probably have not heard their stories. And that was very informative, and it really, it was deep, and it really touched all of us. The amount of time that we have to finish all of this is it's small, and we recognize that the numbers of meetings that we originally thought were going to be enough are not going to be enough. So we started creating these additional meetings and having these additional committees, ad hoc committees, to try to really do the best that we can with this process. Yeah, and that's all I have to say. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. Any last words before we bring it back to the board from anyone else? All right, so I'll go ahead and bring it back to my colleagues. And before I do, I just want to say, Chair Sheffield and Vice Chair Horta, thank you so much for your service. That this is a massive undertaking. And as Chair Sheffield said, this is the first time. And so it is a process of learning for everyone, including the board, including the commissioners, and including staff. And so thank you for being on this journey with us. And hopefully we can kind of chart these waters so that in the future, 10 years from now, there's actually a template that folks can look on, right? And they won't have to reinvent the wheel 10 years from now. So thank you for being part of this initial process, and really appreciate all of the time and energy that you are investing in this, because hopefully it will make a difference over the next decade in terms of representation. So with that, questions for our chair and vice chair, or for staff? Supervisor Gore?
Yeah, the first question I want to ask Ed and Anna is, and this is important, this is very important to me, is do the redistricting commissioners feel that their time is well utilized and that their voices are being heard through this process up until now?
I think that's a good question. I think that's a valid question. I will start by saying we came into this not fully aware of what our role was to be. So, we didn't have a tutorial on what was expected of us. We also came in with the clock ticking. And, from our very first meeting, and at every meeting, I remind all of us commissioners that we have a deadline. That's a constitutional deadline that we have to meet. So we have spent a great deal of time discussing the overall bigger picture of Sonoma County and the issues that we face here at home. A lot of your constituents, definitely the county constituencies, face around equity, around means to be a person of color in this community. As far as getting down to work that needs to be done, we have to do it. We have to do it either way. We are moving forward because of this deadline. I want to believe that commissioners' voices are being heard in the process. I certainly hear from a lot of the commissioners who contact me after meetings, who give me input after meetings to make sure that we are capturing what we're doing. But I think because we're hearing from these commissioners that you all selected, and they're speaking out about the importance of all of these issues that the county faces and has historically faced, it means we did the right thing by creating a group of people this big with so many different perspectives. So, I want to think that commissioners are able to speak up and talk about issues. We've definitely given an opportunity to do that. I think that as we see these maps come in and start hearing voices in the community speaking up about particular maps or giving input in this process, I think that's really important. That's what we really need to listen to. And again, we have to continue moving forward with the short amount of time that we have left, and make available every opportunity for commissioners and the public to speak up and be a part of the process.
Anna, I think I can't hear you. Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what Ed is saying is it's correct. I feel when we first started, we really didn't know what we were supposed to do. So we had to, in a way, learn. The process itself it's complex. It's not that easy to look at all this data and try to fiddle around with a map. And convey that message to the community is even harder. I feel that it would be incredibly helpful to have history and how is this done easily available before? What is it that worked and didn't work? And have these documented, the process we're doing. So when this happens in 10 years, that information is available to all the commissioners or whomever is taking this job. Because we have spent a lot of time trying to learn what happened before, what didn't work before, What were the voices that haven't been heard? So again, creating that memory and that history is an important document in that.
I have another question. It's not only my understanding, but I had a chance to take a look at some of with some testimony that you all set up, where people with lived experiences of oppression and difficulty here in Sonoma County, tribal members, other members of the BIPOC community, underserved, in all different, has had a chance to speak truth and testify. And I wanted to ask you guys to reflect upon that and ask if you have any questions or thoughts about how that gets honored as a part of this process, as opposed to something where you take and try and put it into a map, right? Which this is bringing up a lot of stuff that we have to talk about and we have to address in my mind. And so I'm looking for your advice on how, or for your consideration in a future deliberation on how you can bring that stuff forward, or how we can time to experience that for ourselves.
Yeah, Supervisor Gore, I think the most powerful meeting that we had was the meeting that we had that focused on equity. It was an entire meeting set up on equity. It was facilitated by Dr. Rosa Perez, and we had a very rounded panel. And Supervisor, if you had a chance to check out that meeting, you should go back and take a look at it, because these are the voices historically underserved in our community, and they're speaking from experience, they're speaking from the heart, and they're speaking from culture, and they're doing it in a way that it's uncomfortable for them to do, and it's uncomfortable for you to listen. But I think that hearing the history and hearing from your constituents this way is necessary process, right? So we commissioners, we challenge you, and we challenge each other, and we challenge staff and the demographers. And we're also challenging the community on this to speak up and be a part of this process. We need to capture voice. And this goes back to the outreach work that the ad hoc is doing, as well as the work that HRG is doing as well, is not just giving the community an opportunity to speak, but actually going to them, reaching out to them and having them speak up, giving them that voice, giving them that opportunity, so that when we do hear comments and feedback on the maps and on the process, that we are able to understand perspective, and we're also better able to look at the final product through the lens of equity. That again goes back to the challenge that we're going to put on you. We will give you a narrative to the maps. We will give you the perspective and the bullet point we've heard from the folks in the community when those maps do come to you. And because we have the commissioners have created this this document, this equity focused set of principles, that's what we want to give you as well, so that you can also do a better job in making the final decision on a map that speaks to all of us.
I have more questions, but I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues to let them weigh in. I don't want to usurp all the time. I can come back to it though.
Other questions? Supervisor Gorin?
I have no questions, but I do want to thank you for hiring Herman G. Hernandez for the outreach. He did give a great presentation to the Springs Municipal Advisory Council. And of course, they were desperate for the data that you just presented. So it was a little premature. Their appetites are whetted. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Gorin. To my left, Supervisor Rabbit. None? Supervisor Corsi? Okay. Supervisor Gore, do you have other questions that you would like to ask of our ARC representative?
Yeah, just there's two. One is the issue of acknowledging and honoring people's time put to this. I'm interested in the discussion or how it's worked with you guys with stipends and other things. There's been some conversation about structurally how we support this kind of work. Any feedback on that?
Well, I don't want to. Do want to comment. Don't want to comment on the stipend because we are serving not for the stipend. We're serving because we want to be here and what we're doing. But definitely the efforts, especially around outreach, I believe have been underestimated and underfunded. The commissioners had to ask for these additional engagements to happen. And I think that, it really has to be an emphasis on that, on properly funding the outreach and the education of the community and the commissioners.
And I'll agree, absolutely. I think that there's now when we're going through this process again, and we'll have a template and a model, that outreach component of it, I think that's where the real emphasis, the real focus needs to be.
Well, you guys have a deadline and we have deadlines to meet, but I think there's two things. One is how do we support you with the process going forward? And then what do we do to honor the work at the end of the year? This doesn't just have to wait till a 10-year census. This should be for every equity working group or every normal working group or whatever it might be in the county. So I'll have some comments about that later. But I want to thank you guys. The final thing is just after we did the appointments and you all had your first meeting, then we went through a process where we can you hear? I'm seeing, I know I'm frozen there. I don't feel frozen. Okay, so you guys went through a process where you had your first meeting. That's all come into the board of folks who were frustrated that, quite honestly, it was the way when they went to the first meetings, it was presented as a very transactional process. When some of us on the board had talked about it really being a transformational process. Take a look at this data. Help us not only rewrite the districts, but help us understand our community and where it's going. I know I joined the chair on a call with some of those individuals and with staff, and I know there was that was one of the reasons that some was deployed further into different more contractors and more outreach. For all the things that could be better, is it better at time by your guys' perspective? Has there been an improvement, a demonstrable improvement since those first couple meetings in terms of the effort from the county staff and from trying to point this towards progress?
Yeah, I'll say after our first 3-hour meeting and our second 3-hour meeting, we were still struggling to figure out what our roles were. And once, we got moving, the concerns still came in, and I know that you heard from commissioners as well about these concerns, but I think we started, we were getting our sleeves rolled up and we were starting to work. And I think that that commissioners started to see that. And then commissioners also did, the part of the job of, one of the reasons why you selected us was because of our role in the community. So we started reaching out and sort of created as we went along. Again, going back to, commissioners and the work that we do, I still think that there are commissioners trying to figure out what this process is all about. I want to believe that now that maps are coming in and people are we're getting a sense of what the community wants, because we're hearing from them that, our next meetings, as we start looking at the map process, that, there'll be more input, and commissioners will be more engaged.
Thank you very much.
So a couple questions that I have following up on Supervisor Gore's questions are, has the ARC had an opportunity to talk about sort of principles and philosophy beyond the confines of the law, right? Because there are sort of the things that you must meet. And then I think that there are the values that which you clearly espouse, equity and community engagement, because you formed, ad hocs that are specifically tasked with working on advancing those principles. Have you had an opportunity to think about, honestly, what will make a better democracy for the next 10 years? Because ultimately, I do think that there has to be sort of principles and philosophy that guide what can sometimes feel like a very perfunctory bureaucratic process of this number has to balance, this number has to balance. Oh, we don't want to adjust the lines too much, or someone's election change well, while are laid out in ways in which the odds and the evens are next to one another, right? Which sort of creates this almost institutional bias towards, lack of momentum, I guess. What are some of your thoughts on kind of those principles and those values, and what your diverse and awesome commission represents and wants the board to take consideration when we do end up in that map selection process later on?
You want to take this one, Anna?
So yes, we have plenty of those discussions. That's usually why our meetings go for so long. What I hope for this process and our work is to, we talk about underrepresented populations, and those underrepresented populations are underserved as well. They have been also traumatized in ways that they were still trying to figure out how to heal. They have been marginalized, and it is hard to ask populations that have gone through so much, that just come to the table and, just tell us, what is it that you want? Tell us, what is it that, how do you want this map to work for you? It's the responsibility of government to reach out, since it has been government that has caused so much trauma and damage. So I believe that it is an avenue. We need to give you our views and our opinions, but I think it's the role of government should be larger at engaging us and coming to us in proper ways. So I hope that from this process, we learn that. We keep in mind that it's just not redistricting, that this is what people face on their every day, every challenge they face every day, through fires, pandemic, and all of that. And oftentimes the way we set up systems are inept. They really are. And they don't serve them. And therefore, it's not going to serve us, and it's not going to serve government. So if we want to create genuine change, we have to genuinely engage and involve and hear those populations. So that's what from this process. That's what I hope that we learn. And I don't know, Ed, if you want to add anything else. That's something
Absolutely. I hope is that we are doing the groundwork right now, and that the discussion will continue beyond this working process, and that we'll have 10 years of more discussion. The data that supervisors have requested that maybe isn't reflected in the census data, that we do have that information, and that we use as we are making future decisions, that we're able to better track movement within the county, whether it's people who were displaced because of the fires or for other reasons that people move around. These are really important discussions that can take place and could have taken place prior to us getting census data. And maybe, in some instances, this information, as I said, wouldn't be available in census data, but it's information that's really important for us. At the end of the day, I think we do need to let people tell their story, and we need to listen. So for you supervisors to pay, the challenge again is to pay close attention to community input in the process.
Thank you very much for that. And, a follow-up question. I sort of received the caveat at the beginning that you can't sort of use race as in a way that would violate federal law in terms of making the decision. And yet, I guess, how can we be racially aware in our, redistricting process without running a law? And I'm wondering if you have had sort of conversations specifically about that. And I also would add, are there ways in which honestly race was used as the basis of decisions in the past, right? And then if so, how do we undo that? And I think a lot about, Roseland and annexation as being really, a social justice move for the community that had for too long been ignored by the city of Santa Rosa. And now they have local representation and what that means for them and how empowering that is. And watching the Councilmember Alvarez has brought about, as a result of being from the community and just fighting so hard for that community. So, are there any thoughts on that sort of weird dynamic between, sort of the law telling you can't make this as a basis of decision, but perhaps in the past that was utilized as the basis of making decisions and it resulted in an equitable outcome. So, any thoughts to that and any conversations with respect to that at the ARC?
Yeah, this was our great discussion that we had last month in our meeting that focused on equity. And we heard a lot of the truths, a lot of the history, a lot of the ugly history of Sonoma County. And we all have heard a lot of the ugly history around intentionally taking voice away from communities at the national level. Definitely gerrymandering on base to exclude a population from having the representation that they deserve. But I think that you chose the commissioners because we know our community, and you all certainly know your communities and your neighborhoods. There are things that we cannot do, based on the laws that are in place for how we draw these up. But we do need to take into consideration the uniqueness of Sonoma County, the uniqueness of all of your districts, the neighborhoods that we know have historically been underserved, the neighborhoods that have been identified as being historically underserved, and those that maybe we haven't heard from. We want to again give opportunity for people to we want to give them a platform to speak. That is important too, and I think again this goes back to a lot of the work that Herman G is doing, not the outreach but the reaching out. I attended one of his focus groups and I learned a whole lot. And he's had a number of these focus groups, and he's broken them down to make sure that we have we are capturing these voices. He is taking the input and he is compiling that, and that information then is shared with the commission. It will be shared with you as well. Again, this is a new way of doing things. And I want to hope that we're doing some good in this. I believe that we're doing some good in this. And for many of you, it might not be what you want to hear, but it's the necessary steps that need to be done so that we actually do get this right.
Okay. I do want to say that these issues started perhaps as a race, right? And they're still about race, but they percolate through everything in life, like your ability to access education, ability to buy a house or rent, ability to have sick leave when you're suffering from COVID. So it goes beyond just race, and it goes beyond that numbers. This is, we really need to hear the stories, and not just hear them, but also they have to be documented. They really have to be taken into a place where we can see it, where is our history, where it can no longer be ignored, and it's there for us to go back when we need to, and also take action. Really, what people, the people want representation, and what they want from their government is to take action. It's to allow them to to live a life where they don't have to, whether they have to bring food to the table, or they can stay after fire or not, because they might not. They might have to go live in an area that's cheaper because they can rebuild, or the prices of rent are too high for them to afford to stay here. So it's the picture is big. It goes beyond race. Racism has affected us in so many ways, and we really need to put an end to all of this, and have the conversations and do the things we need to do to truly heal the community and move forward as a society.
Thank you so much for those beautiful words. And, I also appreciate Chair Sheffield, you basically acknowledging, like, we need to get into an uncomfortable space here. And I'm really looking forward to those conversations. I mean, I myself have asked the question, I represent Monterrey, which is 95% white, has had the highest unemployment rate in the county at times, highest homelessness per capita rate, highest rate of opioid-induced fatalities. And I also represent Roseland, right, which is majority Latinx. Which was highlighted in the portrait of Sonoma County as, the most sort of socioeconomically disadvantaged with respect to social determinants of health in the county, and what do those communities have in common? It's interesting. I don't know, just like, do they belong in the same district or not? Or, is diversity within a district in terms of that kinds of diversity good, or is it a challenge? And I look forward to hearing your thoughts on these kinds of questions, because it's a fascinating question. And how can you be racially aware and potentially racially empowering in terms of the opportunity to run for office, right, without sort of running afoul of these federal laws? And so basically, I don't think that there maybe is an answer to those questions that I just asked. If you have any additional thoughts, I'm happy to hear them. Or if it's just something that I hope that you'll continue in your regular meetings, I would open that to you, Chair Sheffield, before we shift to any other last questions.
Absolutely. These, again, are part of the discussions that we have at all of our meetings. I want to encourage commissioners to always speak out at our meetings as well, so that we do have these discussions, whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable. Again, it's giving voices, and by lifting up the voices of people who have historically been left out or underserved is critical to cultivating a fair and inclusive process that we know advances equitable outcomes. And that's really the bottom line in the redistricting process, is we want to make sure that we do advance equitable outcomes.
I really appreciate that, Chair Sheffield, and I appreciate Vice Chair Horta, you acknowledging the many types of structural disenfranchisement that happens, because I've certainly seen that in some of the more rural communities, which are just difficult geographically to access, right? And quite frankly, easy to forget unless you're willing to hoof it out there, to actually meet and interact with the folks on a regular basis. With that, before opening to public comment, I would turn to my colleague, Supervisor Gore.
Just one quick thing. I believe it was Ms. Hsu who said earlier that the reports from Mr. Hernandez's outreach efforts will be available on October 13th or 15th, somewhere in there. I want to make sure that those are available not just to the committee, but to the board at time. Is that the expectation?
So the input that Mr. Hernandez receives through all of his efforts will be sent to the Redistricting 2021 email address, and then will be shared with the commission as well as with the demographer for discussion into those draft maps. Those comments are also available to anyone who is interested in them, as well, including board. The report that I was referencing earlier was the report that Dr. Perez will put together based on the equity panel that we had at the September 14th meeting, where she will memorialize the observations and the insights that were shared there, so that in conjunction with the equity principles that the commission is putting together will be available for the county in general, moving forward on effort this have already a head start in terms of these, looking into some of these areas, and we can build on what we've learned here in this compressed time frame for redistricting.
That's great. And can you tell us again the due dates for those two pieces?
So in terms of input from the public, in terms of, providing qualitative input on neighborhoods or submitting draft maps, we're aiming for October 15th, get feedback in so that they can inform draft maps. It doesn't mean that public input stops there. We will have 3 commission meetings in quick succession, October, and those are all public meetings that the public is welcome to attend and provide input on as well, to the draft maps that are presented there, but also additional concerns that they might have. And then we have also, of course, the 3 board meetings after that in November and December.
And I understand that Mr. Hernandez has been doing some of these outreach meetings in different areas of the county. Is there a schedule for any remaining meetings coming up?
Yes. Pull that out. And Mr. Hernandez might be actually listening in as well. I invited him, so yeah, he may be there. I think he has a couple of town halls, informational sessions on redistricting scheduled in October, as well as an additional drawing event out in Sonoma, I believe. And today he has a focus group as well. So, excuse me, there are 3 more focus groups remaining, one for the Sonoma Valley Springs area, one for Native, tribal, and indigenous groups, and then an additional Latinx group in October. So he's been very, very busy, and we very much appreciate his work.
So these are intended for specific geographical or interest, communities of interest, not the general public. Is that?
The general public is also welcome to attend if they would like. I forgot to include one that's actually a late addition to the schedule. I think he is also scheduling one for the lower Russian area as well, but that date is TBD.
Are these listed on the redistricting website?
The focus groups themselves, because they've been added and kind of are moving around time-wise, are not posted, but the town halls are. And once the details for the additional map are confirmed, those will be posted. But I'm happy to follow up with you on these specific dates, especially for the ones that are moving targets right now.
Thank you, Supervisor Corsi. Any other questions? With that, we can go ahead and move on to public comment, and then we will have an opportunity to share some final thoughts after that. It looks like we do have a member of the public joining us in person in the chambers today. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. I can hear you, but I'm not sure that can folks hear her via Zoom? Are we not so well? Okay, so yeah, let's try to. Thank you so much for. All right, we're having a battery problem. Hang tight, and we will fix that.
Testing, check, check, check.
Thank you so much.
Probando.
All right, and I promise we will restart your clock so that you have your full 2 minutes.
Supervisor Hopkins. I have been coming here for a few years representing the interest of homeless people through homeless action, exclamation point. But I'm here today on that, but I also was sitting in and thought that it would be appropriate for me to thank the committee for its work on La Huerta, Mr. Hernandez. It is so refreshing to see underrepresented communities participating in this process. Because I remember coming to this board to testify and seeing all white men at the board. And this was very intimidating to me. Since then, we've gotten some female participation, but I would really like to see some brown faces. Here, I'm wearing my Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women mask. We have a woman in Cobolo missing, not just for her, but I'm wearing it for everybody. And I'm concerned with the indigenous communities' participation in the county government structure. Also, regarding the Latinx community, the participation is very important because even though we are a small percentage of the total population, when we talk about the economic foundation of the county and who is holding that on their backs, we're talking about our Mexican and Central American immigrant workers.
And thank
who
you very much.
Have been sacrificing their land back.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you very much for that. And I hope you had, I think you came and joined us on your birthday. Was it last week or the week before? So I hope you had a good birthday too.
Yes.
Take care.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. And with that, I believe that concludes our public comment in the meeting. And so we'll hand it over to the Zoom for the virtual public comment.
Thank you. I see that we have a few hands raised, but please, if anybody would like to comment on this and you are a participant in Zoom, raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9 on your phone keypad to raise your hand if you are a phone attendee. And thank you. The first person is a phone attendee, so please unmute by pressing *6 and state your name.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from the underrepresented Roseland Creek Census District. It's been mentioned in the past, and one of the important things to keep in mind is that we haven't received any better situation over the years. Actions speak louder than words, and it's nice that you've paid some people to hold some meetings, but from my discussions with other people in my community, no one has really reached out to the poor and the disadvantaged and the other people unless they were of an ethnic group. It shouldn't be limited just to ethnicity. It should be set in such a way that all people in the Roseland Creek, Shepherd Census District, Roseland Census District, the three most disadvantaged, underserved, and overburdened communities in the portrait of Sonoma County in 2014, have an opportunity to actually participate in this redistricting so that it accurately represents how people who live here feel and hope to have political participation in the future. Electing somebody doesn't necessarily mean that you get representation. The dilemma is always that we're not getting authentic community engagement with the regular people who live here and want to vote on different items. An example is how we're restricted right now, and everything is kept in a lockdown situation, and no meeting participation happens for the people here. Perhaps you folks could have your redistricting people come to the county-owned meeting at 777 Sebastopol
And
Road.
thank you so
a
much for
large
the
building.
comment. I know you can't see the timer, but that does conclude the time. And the next commenters are Kirsten, Fred, then Anna. If you can please unmute and begin your comment.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to the Board of Supervisors and the Chair of the Commission, Yvonne and Crystal, for your presentation, authentic answers, and information shared this morning. I think for me as a commissioner on this commission, this has definitely been an insight into a couple key things that I hope the supervisors consider for their work and ongoing necessary discussions moving forward. Certainly one, community members being engaged in this process, as the pool has certainly become more diverse for this commission and the commissioners working on this. The time spent is definitely key. And while to Commissioner Horton's point, it's not about the compensation, but certainly for those of us who've hosted 4, 5, 6 community engagement meetings, that's a lot of additional time, in addition to full-time work and lives we live outside of this process. This also highlights the need to really establish clear goals when involving large groups of community members for such a huge and important task. And really think about overall the need for the county to really define and step into the uncomfortable truths about how we need to be better about engaging community members in a trauma-informed way, so that these discussions where people are vulnerably sharing the important things about where they live and how the leadership impacts them becomes an action of change and not just another list of things that people are sharing in feedback. And this circles me to my last point. Equity is more than just saying it's forefront, it's really implementing and integrating that into the processes and the ways in which people move forward. I look forward to continuing to learn more, providing mapping that hopefully reflects all of these key pieces.
Thank you. If the next commenter can please unmute and state your name before beginning your comment.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. My name is Alba from Sonoma Valley, and I'd like to say that Ana Horta's comments on equity in government, for me, nailed the whole sense of the issue. A standpoint of an engaged citizen, I think redistricting is doing a good job at outreach, and it's been easy for me to find out and participate with the whole problem. I've drawn a bunch of maps, and I've really enjoyed looking at the data. And the data is obvious and damning for inequity. For me, I think this data will really be more germane to overall governance of the county than in Pac-Manning into one district or another. That if you take this data to heart, that's what to take action on. It's not really about the district, it's about the people in the districts. For the people who haven't been able to participate, there's a Mexican phrase, camarón que duerme se lo lleva la corriente. The sleeping shrimp gets carried away by the current. So how do you engage the people who really like to be engaged? In terms of repopulating and losing $45 million, I think the county's gentrifying. The median rents are just too high to repopulate with workforce. So we're looking at really highlighting the county with more and more wealthy people. So this is where ARPA can compensate for this county, to give free land and really double down on affordable housing. And then we have Latinos at 30% of the county population, but they're split between districts. So people of color tracks with other census categories like annual living at home education. So the question about race and how to deal with that is that you look at all the other categories and go, well, this is a group of interest that's more race, but unfortunately it does track with race. But I think that's the way that you deal with it, is that it's so widespread, as Ana Horta said. And there's my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. If the next commenter can please unmute and state your name.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Marcy. Chairwoman Hawkins, Board of Supervisors, my name is Ana Lugo, and I am one of your commissioners for the 5th District. First and foremost, I want to thank Chairman Ed Sheffield and Vice Chairwoman Ana Horta for doing such an amazing job and the work that the commission has been doing as a whole in such a beautiful and honoring way for our community. I want to touch on a couple of things. The very first thing I want to touch on is equity. Again, I come back to say to you, the level of capacity building that has to happen within the institution of the county to truly understand what it means must happen, and must happen now. The retention of Ms. Rosa Perez and Mr. Herman G. Hernandez, that didn't come in a willing, that wasn't something that was put forward by your institution. It was something that only came after many hours of a lot of tension, a lot of asks and a lot of demands from the commission, that we center equity and that we have engagement. And we still, I know community say we're far from the level of engagement that we need to have, and yet here's the timeline we have. I hope that this commission and that this work serves as for healing, that we are able to look at the biases that have existed within this commission, the level of burden that has been put on this commission. And the last thing I want to say is that race should be the sole factor in redistricting, but it should definitely be a factor. And our communities in Sonoma County are deeply segregated. We need to be looking at race. We need to be looking at that factor as one of the key factors as we decide redistricting. And we need to understand what redistricting looks from my perspective. And I have to tell you that NDC does not have that lens. So I hope that we continue to engage Ms. Rosa Perez in this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Chair Hopkins, that will conclude public comment.
Thank you very much, Marcy. I would bring it back to my colleagues just for thoughts, and I would encourage us to utilize this as an opportunity to share some of your thoughts about your district, your experiencing, representing your district, and any final questions that you might want the ARC to consider as they move forward in the map evaluation process and their deliberations going forward. Supervisor Corsi?
Thank you. And I just want to start by thanking Ed, Anna, and the members of the redistricting committee for the work that you're doing. It's been a bit of a struggle to get here. I'm glad that we're talking about this together now. I haven't had a lot to say today, and that's because I feel like this is the time that we should be helping you to gather the information and take us through the process. It's not a time for us to be guiding you through the process. I feel that the committee is there for a reason. I've taken a hands-off approach to let you do your work. So I'm glad to be hearing from you. And all that said, I will have a couple of things to say to you as well. First of all, and really what I want to do here is play a little devil's advocate through this, because I think that what I'm hearing you hear today is one side of the story. First of all, this committee is carrying a lot of freight as you drive this train down the tracks. There's a lot of pressure to fix things that are historic problems, particularly around race in this community, around representation. So you've got this big load of stuff in front of you with a very prescribed process that limits what you can do. Your charge here is pretty limited in the scope of redistricting voting districts. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm going to be looking for why. I want the why question answered. If there are significant changes, why? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't make significant changes, but I really do want to know what is the solution you're offering, and what problem you're solving with those changes. Just to put this in a little historic context, we've been redistricting every 10 years for forever. The last 50 years, the district lines haven't changed very much at all. Maybe they should have, but what we're looking for is equity in representation, not equity in constituencies. The incorporated versus unincorporated areas argument has been going for as long as I've been hanging around this building. And there are reasons to argue for it and argue against it. Incorporated areas of this county are communities of interest. The third district is 95 or 96% residents of incorporated areas. I hear jokes, complaints, comments about that I represent, but it's a community of interest. The rural areas of this county have had an outside influence on the supervisors for as long as Sonoma County has existed. The non-rural residents need a voice as well. And, to dilute by dividing is antithetical to this process. I would suggest that, well, I know that there are people who believe that the two representatives of the coastal area also would be diluting by dividing. Not saying any of that's wrong. I'm playing the devil's advocate, putting some different perspectives up here. And I hope that that all of you take those into account as you go through your process. Ed, I think that you were the one who said that this committee, or at least the intent of this committee, continues after redistricting is done. And I think that that's probably a really good idea. You all have dived into a bunch of stuff that goes beyond redistricting, that looks some real issues that we need to shine the light on in this community. Again, you're prescribed with a specific job, but that doesn't mean that when that job is done, that this effort needs to end. So I would support continuation in some form of what you started here. After job one is done, there's always another job coming down the road. Thanks again for your work.
Thank you, Supervisor Corsi. Supervisor Rabbit?
No, I appreciate those comments because I think that's true at the end of the day. First off, I want to thank the county actually for taking the road that many didn't travel in terms of how we address the opportunity of redistricting. And I agree that it's a lot more than just 5 new maps for the county's representation. Talking about the issues, the historical issues of equity and representation and the history and the acknowledgement of that, which is vitally important. I think at the same time, will these new maps, I think there'll be people that the conversation won't be satisfied with the production of 5 new maps. I've been quiet on this. I don't care how the maps look or where they go, as long as they meet the state statutes and make sure that we have 5 equal areas that one can represent that have common communities or communities of interest. Whether that's the way it is now, with essentially what we have is north, south, east, west, and or something new. The data shows relatively, homogeneous for all intents and purposes within the district themselves. They're not off by a lot, as was said earlier. So I think it's an important conversation that needs to continue, like Supervisor Corsi said, because I think that the maps themselves are just one element of that going forward, whatever they look like and however they come to be. But I just want to thank those that are working on it and the county for taking this task. There's other counties that have just appointed a single former county administrator who go make the maps and come back and they're going to have their public hearings with that, but a different approach, and one that did not include the community. And I think it's important that we do include the community in this particular endeavor at this particular point in time going forward. So very appreciative of that fact and appreciative of the work that's being done to date, and look forward to continuing to evolve the task at hand, which is producing those equal districts in the county. But as was said, the conversation needs to continue because there's other issues that need to be addressed as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Abbott. Supervisor Gore or Gorin? Supervisor Gore?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to echo one thing, which is my appreciation, but I want to not just thank you for your work, I want to thank you for your patience. Anytime we work on equity, and anytime in my life that I've had an opportunity to work on equity, the first thing you realize is that you have to, well, let me put it in another way. As a white man, what I try to figure out is what's my place, right? Like I may not resemble my community, but what's my role? What's my place? If I represent kind of an institution that is considered to be one that is harmed, and people like me have harmed for so long. And I think the first thing is to listen, and to be able to listen, to create space. And then once it gets messy, you have to stay with it. And so I appreciate every who's participated as the redistricting commissioners for joining us and embracing the mess. Some of the speakers talked about only walking into this place and designing a better process so we don't just bumble over ourselves through each of these different things. And I think that's very important to me. That's the transformational work that can come out of this process, instead of just looking at maps, finding the future. And so I look back over this past year, I think about the creation of the Office of Equity in the midst of the pandemic. I think about the implementation of cultural competency, SB 160, as a part of our emergency plans. I think about the Latinx task force. I think about a lot of fits and starts, and how we've also seen already some good applications to our ARPA dollars from the Office of Equity and others to, dare I say, build a template for the future that honors what's happening. Reason I say that is because here we are with product before us that by all intents and purposes doesn't look like it's going to change much in terms of the maps, right? We wouldn't need to change a single line on a district to conform with the state standard. And yet at the same time, while that might look like a stasis, we're at a true inflection point, a pivot point. We have, in the next 10 years, the shift between now, especially in 2030, 2040, 2050, is gonna reveal what we've already seen in our own reports, that this community is going to be majority Latino. And I think that's something to be embraced by people like me, and diversity. The product that we have to produce at the end of the day, I am interested in it. If my district doesn't change, that's fine. I love my district. I know every corner of it when I campaign. And then when I go out and do residential, meetings and neighborhood meetings, I bring up these questions, and especially I look at my colleagues and just say, I really want to figure out, if our numbers aren't changing that much, how representation, how we make sure that things show important. And I appreciate the devil's advocacy, because this point about, is it more important to separate communities of concern, or is it more important to share communities of concern? I think is a valid one. I come at it from a certain point of view that, pretty simply, is if you bring 2 votes and 2 advocacy voices to the Board of Supervisors, it's stronger than if you come with 1 and say, I need something from my district. I just honestly, I've seen it time and again, that 2 is better than 1, especially with this Brown Act world that we work within. But at the same time, I am totally open to however that looks. I think, from my point of view is that I'm really interested in the advisory council in getting towards the map. But then I would like us to dedicate the time, the money, the 2 most important resources to make sure we honor this work going forward, not just with maps, but number 1, in terms of a review of the construct of how this was set up and how we need to do better. Everything from these stipend conversations to district representations to appointment structures, consent calendar, regular calendar, all these other things. On the other side, I really want the commission and our staff to figure out how this work and how this data set can inform the future in Sonoma County, not just 5 maps. And when I say that, I think about integration. Number 1 is that we have the Portrait of Sonoma County that we're doing a reboot on. For folks who don't know what that is, it's a deep dive into the demographics of our county that shows disparities and shows things like the difference between Bennett Valley and Roseland, 2 zip codes a few miles away, can be the equivalent of 10 years of life, right? And then these huge dramatic changes in education and in opportunity, access to parks and other things. So I am really interested in this group and the work we're putting into it, and the experience they're getting is leveraging not to report to the board, but figuring out how this informs the Portrait of Sonoma County, how it informs our board strategic plan. We all have different pillars we're represented on. And then the third part, which I think is the future of work, which is we're dealing with our telework policies and commutes. And more so, I would say our future investments, not only ARPA, but America Rescue Act, but, our investments going forward after that. The reason I think this is so critical is because while these numbers show one scene of districts and other things, underneath it, what you can see is that the majority of people who live in Sonoma County can't afford to own a home here. You also see that the majority of individuals in Sonoma County not only can't afford to own a home, but can't afford to rent here. My colleague Supervisor Hopkins talked about implications of policies like vacation rentals and other things on housing stock. My other colleague talked about our mandates for regional housing needs assessments. And so I just really, I want this to leverage into something. So I think the transformational work comes from embracing this process and the ups and downs and learning from them. And personally, I need to not just get from you all the stories of experience from people in our community. You have equity, but we should set those up for us as well. So those are kind of things that I'm going to be advocating for going forward. With respect to just a map, right? I've said it before, and I'm interested in the committee coming back. I could care less if my district moves. I've talked on this panel about maybe either Supervisor Rabbit's district down south or my district up north should connect with us. I don't want to take away anything from Supervisor Hopkins's district. That's no intention, but I think that there's important resources that we need to look at. Then on the side, I've also questioned things like my representation of Mark West Larkfield, one of the largest unincorporated areas, if that should be shared, communities of concern, like how do you get your voice before the board? But once again, do what you will. This is your work. just understand that I'm open to all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore. Supervisor Gorin?
Thank you. I'll try to be a little brief here, because a lot has been said. I expect that even though my district, District 1, has shown that we have a population loss from a lot of the reasons that I articulated, the fires and the potentially undercounts in the diverse communities of the Springs, I don't expect my district to change very much either, because the boundaries of the district work. However, I do note when talking about the shared boundary with Supervisor Gore, the neighbors are a little confounded because they have two supervisors representing them on either side of Park West Springs or Franz Valley. And so they're a little puzzled on who they should be working with. And I say to them, well, it's good. You have the attention of two supervisors, but it is confusing for those communities to understand the best way forward in advocacy, especially around the fires and infrastructure projects that we're working on. Conversely, the Farmers Lane boundary makes some sense for my western boundary. Could nibble a little westerly into the center or not, but I also have the southern boundary, which is challenging to get to, and I feel certain needs are ignored. I look at maybe a natural boundary over Sonoma Mountain, and maybe asking Supervisor Corsi to absorb those folks living on the east side of Petaluma Hill Road, or Supervisor Rabbit, as he already represents the Pengrove area. So a lot of those communities of interest straddle the roads going in Pablo Bay. And so there are opportunities for reconnecting communities of interest in those out areas that desperately need the attention of the supervisor. So that might be something that the commission might nibble on as to how we might think about the outlying areas of the district. Not that I'm looking to wholeheartedly pass along some of those areas to other supervisors. I think the natural boundaries get easier or harder for a supervisor to represent those communities of interest. So I'm looking forward to the maps, and who knows, my great D1 team and I might take a stab at developing our own map. So you never know. Thank you for all of your work on this. And I think all of the comments that have been previously given by the other supervisors are absolutely real and important. Understanding the changing demographics of all of the districts. My district trends a little older, and I know that, a little more Caucasian, and I know that, but the needs of my diverse community never be overemphasized. So thank you so much. Look forward to the maps coming forward.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Gorin. I would like to share a few questions that I hope that the ARC can consider in their process. It's been raised by some of my colleagues, but should the coast be split up? I have heard from constituents who feel very strongly that it should. I have heard from constituents who feel very strongly that it shouldn't. I can say that it is a challenge to the only supervisor who is tasked with moving forward, say, the local coastal plan or coastal resolutions, or being the liaison to the coastal commission, when if that were sort of ordered, it would create, not only shared workload, but also shared interest in terms of community investments, right? In terms of funding these, of prioritizing this kind of work, for instance, through Permit Sonoma. Another question that I have is, does the line along the lower Russian River make sense? I see the corridor of the Russian River, and in particular of River Road, as actually sort of an economic and kind of community of its own. I'd also note that at one point we actually had a winery between 4th and 5th supervisorial districts, which to me kind of exemplifies the bizarreness of the line when we literally had a 2 supervisorial district winery project. And the line is sort of drawn just outside of Forestville, but many sort of greater Forestville or rural Forestville residents then are on one side of the line when the sort of town center is on the other side. And I believe the line actually is Mark West Creek because we had to split the cost of the road too. And anyways, it's like bridge is like half yours and half mine. I don't know. One other thought is just sort of this thought of to economically disadvantaged communities. And, are there supervisorial districts that sort of have more of them or less of them? And does that make sense or doesn't it make sense? I mean, I'm just very interested in these communities of interest, both with respect to, sort of the racial components that we've been discussing, as well as the just broader access and kind of social disenfranchisement that we've been describing. But, my biggest question is that, the county was founded in 1850. It was 171 years ago. We've had 1 person of color. We have had 4 years of a female majority board. For the vast majority of our county's history, it dominated by white men in charge of this board of supervisors. And so, looking across at my colleagues, like I love working with all of them, but I don't that we actually look like what Sonoma County looks like. And is there a way to draw the lines to help our board of supervisors look more like the communities that we represent? And I recognize that this is not an all-powerful process, right? There are politics, there are campaign contribution limits, there's so many things, right, that factor into elections and so many different problems that we need to solve. But is there a way that we can actually advance more equitable representation on the board of supervisors through the ARC? And I really, really hope that you will give that some serious consideration, because I would love to come back and visit this process in 10 years and see different faces on the board that really bring more of Sonoma County's diversity to the table. I do want to sort of respond a little bit to some of what Supervisor Corsi mentioned regarding the need for representation for cities. Actually, 3 of the 5 members of the supervisors live inside city limits. And I would say that city residents actually have disproportionate representation compared to rural residents, in that they also are represented by city councils. And we really struggled on this board, I think, to raise attention to rural issues, because at the end of the day, the population base isn't in the rural areas anymore. So I guess I'm not as concerned about sort of I guess I don't see the history of outsized rural influence on the board of supervisors, because I have seen sort of increasingly the power really align along the 101 corridor, and not so much in certainly the east and the western portions of the community where I think we really struggled to run resource out that way. And I do think that we need to have a robust conversation about the unincorporated incorporated balance. I think it's very interesting when you have a position wherein you make decisions, but you don't actually have constituents who are impacted by those decisions, right? If you were to represent an incorporated jurisdiction and you're making land use decisions, say on cannabis, right? There's no one actually who would be impacted by that decision, right? There are some decisions that the board makes that impact the full county, but there are also jurisdictional authorities that we hold that only impact unincorporated residents. And so those land use decisions and that, sort of referrals from Permit Sonoma and from transportation and public work, that is a huge amount of the work that I do and that my staff. And so I think it's important to have this conversation regarding that incorporated and unincorporated balance, and also just the sheer geography that's represented, right? Where one district could be, a 3-hour drive from edge to edge, and another could potentially be 30 minutes. I think it's just conversations that we need to have regarding sort of what it means in governance and what that means in terms of representation and in terms of access to government and in terms of only having one person whose time can only be split so many ways. So those are some of my thoughts. And I also want to kind of conclude my thoughts by saying thank you. I think that this is an exhaustive process, and I just really appreciate the energy and the time that has gone into it. Before we conclude, I wanted to see if any of my other colleagues have any additional thoughts. All right. Well, I do believe that draws us to the close. I'm just making sure, do we need to take a formal vote on this item? I have to pull up my agenda to double check on that. Actually, hang on. My app is frozen. I don't know if the clerk or if there's a formal action or if it's just receive and sort of file the report. I'm trying to pull
We're
it up.
just conducting the hearing today, so
Great.
no further action other than the
Wonderful.
hearing.
So we can consider the public hearing concluded. So thank you all much for your participation, and I really look forward to following the process along and seeing to its conclusion. All right. Okay, and with that, we will be moving on to board member reports on assigned boards, councils, commissions, or meetings. And CAO Bradley, you may have an announcement to kick us off.
Thank you, Chair Hopkins. I wanted to let the board know that yesterday we received notice from the State Department of Health Services that we are getting a $2.4 million grant based on our application for crisis care mobile units. This funding will help the 3 pilot cities that we're working with to do their mobile crisis response. And so I wanted to thank Interim Director Tina Rivera and her staff on that. We will bring in a report back to the board later this month to give you an update on those mobile programs and making recommendations on Measure O funding to help support those programs as well. So more to come.
Thank you very much for that. Now, who's ready with their calendar? Supervisor Gore.
Thanks for asking. I do represent you on the SARA board, and we had a fascinating discussion last week about social investing and how we integrate the concept of social investing into the investment policies. That will be coming forward, but I wanted to let you know that this is a discussion involving our auditor, controller, and employees of SU, as well as great community members serving on the SARA board. So I think this is a step in the right direction, reflecting our values. However, the investment managers are still, and appropriately so, looking at the fiduciary responsibility of the board beneficiaries and not necessarily embracing the concept of socially responsible investing. But there it is. We're making some progress. I did participate in the estuary conference last week, and I mentioned this because the morning was absolutely fascinating and relates to our how we opened the meeting today, talking about Indigenous peoples on the land and the trust and care that they invested in the land. So really, the presentations were given the perspective of the tribal elders of tribes that lived and worked around the Bay, talking about their history and how they use the natural resources of the Bay. And so I think it's recorded, and it may be interesting for us to think about how we can utilize the concepts that they focused on in talking about the Sonoma Developmental Center or the coastal areas or any of the other policy items that we are thinking about in the future to reflect not just 100 years ago, but a couple of years ago. So that was very enlightening and inspiring, and I'm excited to bring that forward to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Gore.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start by just kind of going through last week. District 4, I know the rest of you, I think, had already completed these, but outreach on SB 106 implementation, cultural competency and emergency planning was a wonderful evening. Very challenging, but like very real. I also want to meeting on Measure O ad hoc with Supervisor Corsi on the following day on Thursday, and then Health Act on Friday. Very much.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Gore. Supervisor Corsi?
Thank you. Wednesday, attended the ribbon cutting ceremony for the new generator at the Santa Rosa Veterans Hall, which is one of a series of ribbon cuttings. The Measure O ad hoc that Supervisor Gore mentioned on Thursday. Also on actually for much of last week, I was working with Permit Sonoma with Congressman Thompson's and Huffman's office to try and get an appeal of the finalization of a study that FEMA has done over the last 6 years in a couple of different phases on the Todd Creek, Hunter Creek flood control channels in southeast Santa Rosa. Some decisions made about flood zones that run counter to what history shows in that area and what our engineers believe is the ground truth in that area. The two congressmen on Friday, the chief in Washington to ask for to put that on hold for now, so we can look at the ground truth again, and just take things a little slower there. Wanted to make sure you're all aware of that. Had our Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting on Thursday, and health action again with Supervisor Gore today. Also on Friday, I went out to Schoen Farm to tour Schoen Farm, but also take a look at Santa Rosa Junior College's new wildland and vegetation management program that we help fund with PG&E money, training people to do the work, whether it's to help people create defensible space around their houses, or get out into the land and do the work that's necessary there. Really inspirational stories of some of these young people who have decided to pursue this career. Some really good jobs available in that field, including with PG&E, doing some of the work that they need done around their lines. So that was a nice field trip, which I haven't been doing a whole lot in the last year and a half. And then finally on Saturday, I know Supervisor Hopkins will mention this because she was one of a number of very powerful voices gathered in downtown Santa Rosa to talk about women's reproductive rights and really human rights for all of us. It was great to attend that and hear those voices raised loud and clear.
Supervisor Abbott?
Thank you very much. I'll go in reverse order, I think. Obviously joined you all in a special closed session yesterday. On last Friday morning, we did have a Golden Gate Bridge Highway Transportation District Special Board of Directors meeting where we voted on and approved a new labor agreement with 26 of our 20 labor groups, giving them a raise on a short term in appreciation of a change in health benefits that saved the district dollars. On the 30th, we held our 5th meeting with Marin County, called the Sonoma Marin Extreme Drought meeting, exchanging information on approaches to deal with the ongoing drought. I did that evening have my District 2 operations plan meeting with the Office of Equity and the Department of Emergency Management. And on the 29th, did have an ABAG administrative committee. It was a special meeting and it was regarding the RENA appeals. Fortunately for me, there's 40 hours of ABAG administrative committee meetings being scheduled for RENA appeals because 1 in 4 jurisdictions have appealed the RENA allotments. So I get that pleasure for the next 5 weeks going forward. Sonoma County did appeal as well. And just so you know, an RENA appeal will not decrease the overall county allocation, just the location. So it's not the number, but the location. Obviously, in this county, we all favor city-centered growth, and that's where the majority of the units should be. And just to give you an idea for the county's urban land area is just slightly larger than that of the city of Petaluma. The city of Petaluma has a draft arena allotment of 1,910 units. We have a draft allotment of 3,880 units. And what we're asking for is to actually match the city of Petaluma. The fifth cycle, the last cycle, we had 515 units. So we have a 650% increase. If we match the city of Petaluma, we will have a 271% increase over the last cycle, much higher than the Bay Area average of 135%, but still, we believe very much achievable. So just wanted to put that out there. I will tell you, I have to recuse myself from that particular hearing. And we've had 2 days now with 8, maybe 10, and no appeal has been up. It's typical appeals do not get upheld. There might be, if there's a math issue, some things do get shifted around. There's been a few, some of that. And I think I've told you before, I did vote against the methodology because it did shove too many units in the unincorporated units. Seeing Contra Costa had an appeal, which I voted to uphold because of that same reason. It failed. So I don't have any illusions that we will be successful in this appeal, but I think the points are important to make going forward. And we can swap with our brethren cities, but it's a little harder to do that when you don't have it out of ABAG itself. So I just wanted to let people know that that's all in process and ongoing, and appreciate very much staff working on that. Jane Riley has kind of taken lead and contract services, but Tennis Wick has done a great job in terms of getting the team together to make the appeal and have it be. I think people are sympathetic, but I don't think they're going to be so sympathetic that they will uphold it.
Supervisor Abbott, can any of us attend to sort of make public comment during that appeal process?
You're certainly more than welcome. Would never turn that. It's not typical for appeals. It's an appeal process, much like we have. This is actually through the administrative committee will be a recommendation or straw vote, and that will be tallied up and brought back to the, I think in the beginning of December, bag itself to take that final vote. I think for me, what this really says, and it's a missed opportunity in this cycle, you need to do a sub-region approach like Napa does, like Santa Clara does, and some other, I think there's one other county. And that's where you just accept the number for the county and we'll figure it out with our jurisdictions. We tallied, or we asked if there's interest in doing that this cycle, and the majority of the city said no. I think once they see the numbers and they have to deal with the new cycle numbers the next time around, I think they should say yes. I think they will say yes, because it'll have more flexibility. Counties can give units to cities. Cities cannot give units to one another. And there's some, things in there that just by law are a little more restrictive. That's my long answer to say you're more than welcome to make your voice heard. I've heard others do the same and not be successful.
So we're welcome to make our voice heard, aka our head against a brick wall that is unlikely to move.
It's pretty much.
Yes. One final question. I mean, have they really actually thought about where these are supposed to go in Sonoma County? I mean, are they supposed to go in, let's see, our fault zones, our floodplain, or our high wildfire severity zones, which are, encompassing a substantial portion of the unincorporated areas?
Yeah, and to be fair, right, this is not ABAG making numbers up. This is the state putting these numbers from Sacramento. Here's what this region has to accommodate. And to be fair, our county is on the very low end. The majority of the units within the Bay Area are going where they should be built: San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, the primary urban areas. But as a percentage overall, we're all in the same boat that these numbers are huge. And there's a lot of sympathy with everyone appealed last week's turn because, and they're having all the same issues. Where are we going to put these units and how are we going to, I think there's a bigger issue going on eventually that the state will need to kind of come to grips with, in the region, just like with Plan Bay Area, quite frankly, putting that onus on the region, saying you go and figure out your, climate change plan for your region. And, at some point you can't do it without the state really kind of coming in and having a better conversation, or really assisting you in achieving your overall goals. And thus far, this particular one, and even Plan Bay area. Another reason for our appeal, I believe, that totally contrary to everything in Plan Bay area, which is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing vehicle miles traveled. Why put so many units in the unincorporated county where you're not in the heart of an incorporated city that will have more access to services, let alone water, sewer, and all the usual things that it takes to build a structure that would accommodate as many units as is planned. And this is from a county, as we all know, that is not shy of taking our lead on trying to accommodate housing in the unincorporated area. It was a faulty methodology that we're still paying the price for.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Abbott. Any other questions for Supervisor Abbott on that complex topic? For my part, I did attend just a plain board meeting as well as the women's rally. And I also just, for my colleagues to know, arranged a meeting with some of our county department heads and staff support from the CA office, Sweetwater Water District, just in an effort to really try to bolster the institutional relationships between unincorporated governances and the county. There have been a number of issues with, for instance, the relocation of the Monterey Bridge, sort of overlapping or sort of potentially competing HMGP grants, sort of trying to figure we can really work more seamlessly with some of our unincorporated forms of governance. So that was also a topic of conversation. With anything else, not seeing anything else to report. So that will bring us to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda, but in the subject matter jurisdiction board and on board member reports. And we do have one member of the public here in person in the chambers to come speak with us. Good morning and welcome. Let's make sure your mic is hot before we get going.
Okay. Am I hot?
Yes, I believe you are.
Great. My name is Liz, physician and a former vineyard owner. I have 9 acres in the Sonoma Valley. I want to speak about a pollution issue involving the Arroyo Seco, which is a environmentally sensitive creek running through the valley. My property is adjacent to the Olive Tree Farm, which is a large grapevine nursery. For many years, they have been polluting my property with high concentration boron water. Basically, all the water in this area, all the groundwater, has high concentrations of boron to be processed to remove the boron. This generates an enormous quantity of wastewater. And the nursery has chosen to outsource their pollution to my property and now into the Arroyo Seco. The county was involved in an inspection here. The county totally whiffed. I brought a complaint to the wastewater control, or to the water control board for the Bay Area, and detailed the pools of water that have accumulated in the Arroyo Seco this summer when there has been no flow whatsoever. These pools of water are very high in boron, which is exactly what you expect from the wastewater from a water treatment system removing boron. All of this has been verified by laboratory analysis and also by an opinion. The Water Control Board commissioned the county to do an inspection. John Mack of the Natural Resources, he's the Natural Resource Manager, whatever that is, was instructed to do that inspection. He looked, he saw nothing of interest. He left, he dismissed it.
And I do hate to interrupt you because I appreciate you coming here in person today, but is there a way that you can follow up specifically with your district supervisor on this matter and maybe exchange information, because that does conclude your 2 minutes.
And he
Supervisor Gore?
has, and Lynn and I are in conversation. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you making us all of us aware of it, and we're happy to accept any written materials that you might have and can review them. But that does conclude your time this morning.
Okay. The county's response has been grossly inadequate. Mr. Robledo is polluting the Arroyo Seco, just like he is my property.
And thank you.
That's a
It sounds like
damning
Supervisor
accusation
Gore
to make
is
in
looking
public.
into it. Thank you. And we're happy to accept any written comment that you might have, but we do
Okay.
need to move on to the next public commenter. Thank you so much, Lynn,
This
and
needs to
have
be
a good day.
addressed.
Take care. Welcome back, Victoria. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much. I am Victoria Yanez, volunteer attorney with Homeless Action ! And I would like to speak, I think it's a closed session subject regarding where home services will reside within the county. And pursuant to Welfare and Institutions Code 17,000, which lays out the duty falls with the county to provide for those not covered by any other program, the indigent of the county. And that is usually single, but now it's broadened out. Now, in years past, the general assistance program was styled by subsistence needs studies for county, and that would determine the grant amount for somebody to live, eat, and monitor their hygiene, so make them employable. Now, the housing factor is totally taken out of general assistance for all intents and purposes. Now, with the money coming in, I would like to see that program fertilized to become what it's supposed to be, not a 3-month grant out of the year. No wonder we have so many people. So the thing about it is, homeless services should be with general assistance.
And thank you, Victoria. That does conclude your time. Appreciate hearing.
Thank you very much. I also want a living room for all they've been getting me
Any
housed.
other members of the public who
Thank
wish
you.
to comment on matters not listed on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and hand it over to Marcy to accept public comment via Zoom.
Thank you. I'll ask, thank you so much for the timer slide. The first commenters are Jana, followed by L. Light and Sasha. If you can please be ready to and state your name when prompted.
Good morning, everybody. Jana Blunt, president of SEIU 10-1 Sonoma County chapter, employee of the Recorder's Office. 3 weeks ago, during the ARPA funding calendar item, I told you all that over the next few weeks and up until funds start being allocated in December, you'll be hearing from many of your workers right here to demand a hazard pay bonus for the excessive hardship, dangerous conditions, and financial impact placed against us as public servants and essential workers. This week, I wanted to talk about the meet and confer. You know, our union met and conferred with Human Resources for 12 months in good faith to address the impacts on our workforce from the county's response to the pandemic. All attempts at ending HR's acknowledgement of our workforce's struggle, financial or otherwise, were denied. Even after repurposing each proposal several times, hazard pay, comp hours as alternative compensation, even a temporary vacation accrual cap lift were all robustly denied. Allow me to read my favorite passage from management in one of their responses to our attempts to secure any of these options for our workers. Note, we received this message prior to any available vaccine. Quote, While the county acknowledges that interaction with the public has the potential to expose an employee with COVID-19, that is a result of the COVID-19 public health emergency itself, not a county decision arising from the emergency. I don't think you need me to tell you that that statement is patently false. It's bad faith communication. It's certainly cold and condescending. But most importantly to me, to this day, it's a transparent sign of a lack of regard for my well-being, for the well-being of over 4,000 county employees, and most importantly, the public who are in physical contact every day. Thanks so much for listening.
If the next comment complete and state your name.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Light. I'm a job steward for SEIU Local 10-1. I work in economic assistance, but today I'll be reading on behalf of another County of Sonoma employee who cannot be present today. I work in behavioral health division and I'm a member of ESC. My wife is also a county employee. COVID-19 ruined family. My grandmother survived Nazi-occupied Austria and even beat breast cancer. COVID took her from us, and it was me or my wife who was responsible for killing her. One of us brought the virus home. I want to ask the CAO why she insists on a minimum of 50% in-office work for those of us who don't need to be. We have accountants, programmers, and legal processors all over the county who've been pulled into work 4 more days per week in the office, and they're being given all sorts of unreasonable excuses as to why it's necessary. Don't you understand? Provide even more exemplary public services when we're not being squeezed into these offices like sardines. The CAO will tell you I'm exaggerating. Talk to the workforce. They'll tell you differently. They'll also tell you why they've earned a hazard pay bonus many years over. Thank you for your time, and I yield my time.
Thank you. The next commenters are Sasha, Travis, and then a phone attendee.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Sasha Cohen. I work for Economic Assistance Division of Human Services Department. I'm an SAU 1021 union steward, and I will be reading a statement on behalf of a coworker. It begins. Hello, my name is Tracy Allen. As an eligibility supervisor with Economic Assistance, I have spent the last 18 months learning how to effectively support my team of workers in a completely new work environment while navigating ever-changing rule regulations and just overall fear surrounding this pandemic. I placed myself, my husband, my elderly parents whom I live with, my stepson, and my daughter at our risk of exposure in order to ensure that my workers are supported and the public has the benefits they need now more than ever. I do so willingly, knowing the role that I signed up for when hired on with the county. I also do so with the hope and faith that my employer, guided by the Board of Supervisors, will make sure that I am supported from a safety and financial standpoint. You will make sure that the work I have done during what is the most uncertain and scary times of my adult years is both seen and appreciated. You will make sure to grant us the hazard pay that myself and my coworkers deserve. Thank you, and I yield the rest of my time.
If the next commenter can please unmute and state your name.
Hi, my name is Travis Balzerini. I work for IS as a senior program analyst, and I'm the SEIU chapter vice president. I'm calling today because your workers deserve hazard pay. Our county received $96 million from the legislation, which singles out premium pay for frontline workers as one of its intended uses. Many of your employees reported to work during this pandemic to continue serving the public, risking their lives and the lives of their loved ones. COVID has impacted all employees, whether they met in person with at-risk clients, assisted customers at our counters, lost hours and wages for parks and facilities being closed, or had to set up a home office and purchase the necessary equipment to telework. Please allocate a small portion of ARPA funds for its intended purpose of compensating our employees for their resiliency, flexibility, and dedication during COVID, fires, and flood. Thank you. Exceed my time.
If the next commenter can please unmute, you are a phone attendee, so you're prompted to press 6. And please state your name.
Rob McGilly of the 9/11 Truth Campaign. Hey, Linda Hopkins, we the betrayed people are suffering under corrupt and lying elected public servants who concealed 2,888 unplanned on 11, caused by our sex-starved, power-crazed Enron puppet President George W. Bush exploiting 9/11 to kill his wife. Concealing presidential attempted wife killing is now aiding communist China take over the world while you can to have lunch in the Santa Rosa Mall. Our president tried to get our First Lady, Laura, killed by leaving her in the White House on 9/11 for his sponsor, Ken Lay's attack on the West Wing of the White House to painlessly take out his competitor, Energy Czar VP Dick Cheney. Laura saved from certain death in the White House on 9/11 by George H.W. Bush, Ken Lay, and Warren Buffett. Ask our Phantom President Willie Brown. 9/11 gone as Willie's California energy bandit partner, Enron boss Ken Lay planned, anti-Enron energy czar VP Dick Cheney would have been painlessly taken out in the West Wing of the White House by 4 Al-Qaeda Martyrdom Battalion suicide bombers seeking paradise and 72 virgins with time surprise attacking hijacked United Airlines Flight 93. Wizard of Deception, Willie would have been appointed our U.S. Vice President before the asbestos dust settled over the World Trade Center after 9/11. After 9/11 was the most treasonous government organized crime ever planned. 9/11 was a butch-botched Enron organized crime planned by desperate Enron builder Ken Lay and exploited by World Trade Center lessee Larry Silverstein. It went wrong when then President Bush tried to exploit 9/11 to become a widower by leaving his wife in the White House.
And the next commenters are Hannah, Jill, and a phone attendee.
Hi, my name is Hannah Daypray. Can you hear me? Yeah. I
Yes.
am an SEIU member as well as forensic interviewer at RCC and previous emergency response worker during the COVID pandemic. Today, I wanted to talk about a few more instances of where COVID impacted my job, specifically having to go to the emergency room frequently to have kids medically cleared after they were removed from dangerous situations. I've probably been in the ER over 100 times in the last 2 years with small children not being able to wear a mask or being exposed in other ways. When I would go home to my own children who were infants and toddlers, I had a procedure and protocol that allowed them to stay safe. That included undressing in the garage or downstairs, sanitizing myself, and putting on new clothes and inside. I would then bag up my clothes and have them washed every day. Many workers in ER had to take these precautions, and yet we were still exposed to COVID. Oftentimes having to quarantine and having our families quarantined at the same time. In the same house, I often had to be in a separate room from my family for up to 10 days or longer, isolated and able to help, while still doing my job, working from home. After that, we went back out into the community again, only to be exposed there. And again, as I said last time, we didn't do this for extra pay or hazard pay. We did it because our community needed us to. I would appreciate the supervisors having the same commitment that we do to our community. I yield my time.
The next commenter should be able to unmute, do so and state.
My name is Jill Caden. I'm a park aide with the Sonoma County Parks, and I'm with SEIU 1021. And I've been on the front lines ever since April of 2020. With just getting the phone call of you need to come to work and wear a mask and let anybody in the parks. It was a pretty scary time. You know, they kept telling people, you know, that was when we were in quarantine, but just kept coming. Well, during that time, my older daughter, before the vaccine, got COVID 4 times, and I've had friends lose loved ones that were young and healthy. So as time went on, it was very scary when the parks and the media kept saying, oh, well, now it's safe, we're out of quarantine, go outside. You need to be outside. You know, it's safe out there. And, you know, we're scared. We're listening to things, and people came by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds to the beach. I mean, it was like ants out here, and the bathrooms were jammed. And, you know, they would get upset if you'd ask them to put a mask on or step back. And we had one-on-one contact with hundreds of people. And we had to clean bathrooms and put toilet paper in, and trying to figure out how to get in there to do that was a lot of work, you know, collaborating work on how would we do this. And even now we still are overwhelmed, and we're inundated with people over and over and over every single day, even during the week. It's not just the weekends. We're still trying to solve that problem of dealing with who's vaccinated, who isn't. You're not allowed to ask. And, you know, we want them to at least step back, not get those. And people do get very upset with us when we ask them to step back. And we're just always under pressure, thinking of different ways of dealing with the public, but taking care of ourselves. The Parks Department tells you.
Thank you very much for the comment. That does conclude time. The next 3 commenters are phone attendees, so please listen and press *6 to unmute.
This is John Thrower with the 9/11 Truth Campaign. It went wrong when President Bush tried to exploit 9/11 to become a widower by leaving his wife in the White House. A certain death 6 weeks to 99-year World Trade Center lessee Larry Silverstein. The tower with 2,763 unplanned New Yorkers inside in 9/11, then collecting $455 billion in terrorist insurance. The FBI and involved courts criminally concealed 2,800 President George Bush caused unplanned murders on 9/11, and to cover it up with public martial law 107-24, aka Iraq Authority to Use Military Force, AUMA. This move exposed 173 top congressional traitors, including Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, and Adam Schiff, who all voted to use the armed forces of the United States as he determined to be necessary, which is treason and is not pursued with our precious constitutions. President George W. Bush caused 2,888 unplanned murders on 9/11, attempting to become a widower. Congresses and President Barack Obama and Donald Trump know that 9 times traitor elected by rigged U.S. elections, President Joe Biden shall not hold any office under the USA. Under the U.S. Code Title 18, Section 2381, Exhibit 13, pedophile President Biden's first executive order opened our south borders to facilitate U.S. detainments of over. Executive order opened and.
Thank you so much. That does conclude the time. The next commenter, please unmute and state your name. If the next commenter can please listen and press *6 to unmute.
This is Daniel from the 9/11 Truth Campaign. Public Law 107-243. The crime against humanity gives aid and comfort to Communist China's secret war on the U.S. Joe Biden must be removed from office, and then Public Law 107243 must be repealed. Restore our Constitution of the United States. Isn't that right, our good neighbor Congressman Barbara Lee in Oakland? You did our county a favor repealing the Martial Law 107243 and HR 256 in the 117th House. No doubt Jackie Spear, O. Lofgren, and Mike Thompson helped. Any bound by oath of office, did law officer or judge who conceals the above is ripe for death sentence from juries in courts under constitutional law. But our president, presiding judge Bradford J. DeMayo refuses to provide due process of law for our 25-page petition, redress of grievances, and Captain petition for extraordinary relief in the nature of prohibition prohibiting Biden from holding any office under the United States of America. His dishonest refusal to assign a Superior Court case number prevents our petition from being processed by court. His dishonor commits high treason. The cost to Port Authority of New York and New Jersey's growing asbestos dust liability and its two asbestos-loaded 110-story steel towers that corrupt the city of New York that permitted the towers. It would have cost over $300 million to remove the asbestos.
Thank you so much
in
for
the
the comment.
towers.
That does conclude the time. The next commenter can please unmute and state your name. Again, the next commenter is a phone attendee. You should hear that the host has unmuted you and you can press *6.
Our President Bush, this is Mary Morrison. Our President George W. Bush caused 2,888 unplanned murders on 9/11, attempting to become a widower. 10 Congresses and Presidents, Barack Obama and Donald Trump, know that 9-time documented traitor, elected by elections, President Joe Biden, quote, shall not hold any office under the USA, under U.S. Code Title 18, Section 2381, with 13. Pedophile President Biden's first executive order opened our south border to facilitate U.S. detainment of over 20,000 children, quote, as determined to be necessary, unquote. This is U.S. government-sponsored child trafficking at its finest under Public Law, Martial Law 107243. This crime against humanity gives aid and comfort to Communist China's secret war on the U.S. Joe Biden must be removed from office, and then Public Law 107243 must be repealed to restore our Constitution for the United States. Isn't that right, our good neighbor, Congresswoman Barbara Lee? You did our country a favor repealing Public Martial Law 107243 in H.R. 256 in the 117th House. No doubt Jackie Spears, Zoe Lofgren, and Mom. Any bound by oath of, did you know just before 9/11, the World Trade Center's lease was sold to Larry Silverstein? Silverstein took out an insurance plan that fortuitously covered terrorism. After 9/11, Silverstein took the insurance company to court, claiming he should be paid double because there were two attacks. He won and was awarded $4.55 billion. Any bound by oath of office, elected public servant, law officer, or judge who conceals this is ripe for death sentences from juries in courts under constitutional law. But our presiding judge, Bradford J. DeMayo, refuses to provide due process of law for our 25-page petition for redress of
Thank you for the
grievances
comment. That
in cap.
concludes the time. Our next commenter, Susie, if you can please unmute and begin your comment.
Hello, my name is Susanna and I work for SEIU here at the Sheriff's Department. Janitors and detention assistants are classified civilian staffs and are in charge of providing and cleaning up within the units and throughout the building and offices in the jail. We are utilizing inmate work crews and supervising them as to help within the jail. During COVID, we had to stop doing this and do the work ourselves. Carts, metal carts throughout the jail. Janitor crews directly involved in cleaning up bodily waste mess left in the cells by inmates. Detention assistants are directly in contact with soil, clothing, and bedding from every inmate occupied. Before the vaccine and was available, every janitor in the jail has tested positive for COVID and had to quarantine. And detention assistant became very seriously ill due to COVID. As a result, outside agencies be called in and our remaining work filled with overtime to assist in the janitorial work, to bridge the gaps and keep the running. Even our people diligently worked and returned from absence to pick up one another's chores, including taking up the janitor's task work and running to keep the operations going. We often entered modules that had COVID outbreaks to serve in the units and provide commissary and needed items to supply the inmate. And work exposure notifications are common occurrences with each of us, and we receive several notifications every day. We are asking to be recognized as workers during these trying times with hazard pay. We are proud to be part of the sheriff's family, and personally, I would like to recognize our captains for working to keep us safe and the facility healthy and running. As a task that I can only imagine that comes with a heavy burden. I yield my time.
Next commenter is the phone attendee. Please unstate your name.
Yeah.
Well, this is John Hinkle. And I have to tell you that any bound by oath of office elected public servant, law officer, or judge who conceals the of that Mr. What's his name? Silverstein collected $4.5 billion for what?
Terrorist insurance.
Terrorist insurance on 9/11.
Okay, and we're not hearing you right now.
Anybody who hides this stuff, who is an official, is committing treason, and we're ready to make the charges. And I'd rather with you than charge treason against you, Linda. It's that simple. And I've asked you before, we'd like to get a meeting with you and our county council to get his opinion on this whole thing. And it's no question that we have the goods on you all.
That concludes the time. Thank you for the comment.
Straight.
The next commenter can please unmute by pressing *6, state your name and begin your comment.
This is Karina from the 9/11 Truth Campaign. Our top local elected public servant, Linda Hopkins, moving our country administration office to the downtown Santa Rosa Mall, Exhibit 1, is a criminal waste of our taxes and distracts you from Communist China's secret war against the democracy run by this top foreign agent. was a deception, Willie Brown, who is now the phantom president. Our county, Sonoma 5th District Supervisor Linda Hopkins, we the people, Sonoma County Board of Super Puppets, you Susan Gorin and Chris Corsi and James Gore are bound by oath of office. Exhibit A, elected public servants conspiring to spend 26 million in tax dollars to demolish and then rebuild a country of county administration office in the downtown Santa Rosa Mall, away from the existing courts, jail, and sheriff's office that we, your constituents, easily reach by U.S. Highway 101. There is no reason for the movement other than you must be getting a serving communist China and a goal ending the freedom of destroying the democracy within starting with the Joe Biden and 373 other documented traitors treasonously passing public martial law 07-243 Exhibit 4. Made in China wildfires as 9:45 p.m. on October 8, 2017, the north of California and moved west 13 miles, pushed by high winds from the east. 4,000 homes in Sonoma County in Exhibit A were then all demolished within 1 hour, but only murdered 22 Sonoma County residents in Exhibit 6. Made in China, COVID-19 plague that murdered over 300.
Hopkins and board, that closes public comment.
Thank you very much, Marcy. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Council Pittman for a report out on yesterday's closed session.
Thank you, Chair Hopkins. Yesterday, the Board of Supervisors met in closed session to discuss the matter listed as item number 1 on the special meeting agenda. The Board of Supervisors met in closed session to confer with agency negotiator Christina Kramer in regards to public employee appointment for the position of public defender. No reportable action was taken at that meeting. Direction was given to the agency negotiator, and that comes to report out from yesterday's closed session. Today's matters will be, the report out from today's closed session will occur at next Tuesday's regular meeting.
Thank you very much, Council Pittman. And with that, I will ask if there are any members of the public present in person who wish to comment on the closed session items, which is items number 18 through 21. Seeing none, I will ask Marcy if there are any members of the public who wish to comment on the closed session calendar via Zoom.
Thank you. Please raise your hand. If you would like to comment on any of the closed session calendar items before the board, press star 9 to raise your hand if you are a phone attendee. There are no for comment, and that will help.
Thank you very much, Marcy. So with that, the Board of Supervisors will be adjourning into closed session now. Thank you all.